Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Command Zone podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Weeks.
How's it? It's Josh Lee Kwai.
Today, we are talking about the cards that matter to you, Commander players, in the 99 from Lost Caverns of Ixalan.
I'm pretty sure that's what it's called.
This one always messes me up. Lost Caverns of Ixalan, of course. This set is full of super powerful new cards.
Yeah, a lot of really cool stuff. They've got some really cool design things going on. The set looks amazing so far. It's kind of surprising we're at the end of our coverage for it. This is our last episode.
Yeah, and we've talked about some really exciting cards, but I feel like doing the cards in the 99 justice is a big part here, because there's some really, really sweet new cards, including some cool stuff from your favorite creature types, dinosaurs, merfolk, vampires, all the best.
Pirates. Don't forget pirates.
Pirates.
Yeah, of course, we're going to talk about a bunch of cards from LCI today on this episode. If you want to pick up any of those cards, just head on over to cardkingdom.com/command. That's the best place to go to buy your Magic products, singles, anything at all. You can pre-order, or I guess at this time it's just regular order. All the stuff you want for your commander decks. There's a couple cards in here you're definitely going to want multiple copies of.
For sure.
Because they're going to go in a number of your different decks. And of course, Card Kingdom, known for having a ginormous inventory. They're going to have the cards you're looking for in the condition, in the version. They are a huge Magic retailer that gets you all your stuff in one package. That's the best part about it. You fill your cart with 63 plus cards. Don't go too far over 63 because you need 37 lands. And then you hit checkout. They put it in one package. It all arrives on your doorstep in one convenient package. That's why we love Card Kingdom. Again, cardkingdom.com/command.
And once those cards are in your hand, you're going to need to protect them. You can support those cards and the show by going to ultrapro.com/command. UltraPro has the highest quality Magic accessories in the business, including some really, really gorgeous accessories from Lost Caverns of Ixalan.
Yeah.
This set has amazing Mesoamerican inspired art, and it is all over playmats and sleeves and binders. Go check it out. If you are especially into these precons, which are really, really exciting precons that have great value in them, they have the playmats and stuff to match. If you're building any of the face commanders, get the playmat, get the sleeves, show up to your game night ready to roll representing your team. And you can get all of those over at ultrapro.com/command.
And the final way to support all of our content is directly if you go to patreon.com/command zone. All kinds of cool perks for joining our community and becoming one of our patrons. We hang out, chit-chat on Discord all the time. Patrons get to see extra turns and game nights earlier than the general public. They get access to exclusive content that we only release for the patrons. There's also merch. There's a lot of stuff. We try and make it worth it because those people are our biggest supporters and one of the main reasons we're able to make our content. So again, patreon.com/command zone if you want to support us that way.
Plus, we shout out one lucky patron every single episode, and this one is dedicated to Jared Coleman. Jared, you rock.
You definitely rock. And we've been mentioning this recently, but in case you haven't heard, we did start a TikTok recently.
Yeah, we're doing short form content.
Yeah, so we're having fun with it. It's going pretty well. We are considering expanding that, so if you like TikTok, go ahead and give us a follow.
Yeah, follow us there. Check out the shorts right here on YouTube, or, if you're listening to this as a podcast, go to YouTube.
Yeah. go to There's so much text on cards now that I feel like I almost have to be on YouTube watching it to even follow
I know.
along.
I can't even imagine.
I was listening to Limited Resources set review for
we just started
the other night, but I keep having to rewind because I'm like, what's the card do again? Because it's like if it's a 2/2 vigilance and when it enters, it gives a target creature +1/+1, I can hold that in my head.
Right.
But when you also have to craft it for 3 and a white with an artifact and then it flips over and becomes a 4/4 flyer that when it attacks, I can't hold all that. So I keep going like, okay, they're talking about this card still. What's it do? So yeah. So watch it on YouTube. That's the moral of that story.
Definitely. We're going to read some very, very long cards today. So listen closely. We're going to do our best. Starting, there's a lot of really good cards in this set, just overall. What they've been doing lately is in order to design more powerful cards, they've been making them super niche. There's a lot of very powerful niche cards in this set. Where they're specifically built around +1/+1 counter deck, or specifically built around merfolk or something like dinosaurs.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk about a ton of those today. That doesn't mean they're great. If you have a dinosaur deck, take a look at all the dinosaur cards. definitely pick some of those up. We're going to talk about the ones that you're probably going to see the most, that apply to the most decks and have the most sort of general power.
Yeah, and you don't need us to tell us, hey, put the cool vampire in your vampire deck, right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't need us to tell you that. Yeah, okay. So let's start out here. The first, we should say we're going to discuss some legendary creatures, but in the context of this episode, those legendary creatures, we'll be talking about them as if they were in your 99, not as if they were your commander, which would have been CZ 571, episode 571, I believe, which was the most powerful commanders, where we talked about cards as commanders. Okay. First card.
All of that out of the way.
You want to do the honors?
We're doing it. It's Bloodletter Aclazotz. 1 black, so 4 mana altogether for a 2/4 flying vampire demon. If an opponent would lose life during your turn, they lose twice that much life instead. And a little bit of a reminder, damage causes loss of life.
Yeah, so this will double damage, kind of, too.
Yeah, it doubles the results of damage.
There you go.
Which is the point of damage often.
But yeah, okay, that's true. There is some semantics here.
Yeah, this is tricky. We've never seen like a life loss doubler exactly. We've seen, what are these, triggered abilities? Yeah, like triggered effects that cause you to lose the amount of life you've already lost.
Or cause them to, usually.
Yes, yeah, your opponents. That's the idea, I suppose. Like Archfiend of Despair and Wound Reflection.
Yeah. Those are loss of life doublers in a sort of a different way, the way they're templated. Yeah. I think effectively it won't make a ton of difference.
Yeah, it's one happens now and one happens at the end of turn.
Yeah. And now is almost, I mean, most of the time going to be better just because they have a less of a chance to be like, okay, before end step, I'm going to destroy that Wound Reflection so I don't take that double damage.
It is worth noting that the Bloodletter only applies on your turn. Yeah. It will not double loss of life on any of your opponent's turn like the other two do. But it's 4 mana cheaper, so we like that.
It is 2
mana cheaper, excuse me.
Yeah, it is 3 black mana, though.
Yeah. That's
like an upside downside thing.
It means business, that devotion. You can't just throw this in any 3-color deck. I think you need to be at least heavily black, even in a 3-color deck.
At least half black, I would say. Yeah. That's definitely a hurdle. Okay, how does this work exactly with damage?
Yeah.
Just to be clear, because there's loss of life and there's damage, and sometimes they're different, but sometimes they're the same.
Right. We often treat them like they're similar.
I mean, they are similar.
Yeah, we also treat them like they're the same. But in this case, like, let's say you're attacking with a 4/4 lifelink. The 4 damage would be dealt. You would gain the 4 life from the lifelink, but your opponent would lose 8 because the results of the damage, the loss of life, is doubled.
The life gain's not doubled, but the loss of life is doubled. And damage is loss of life.
Right.
Loss of life is not necessarily
damage
always
causes
damage.
Loss of life.
Yeah. Okay. That's a weird thing.
It's very bizarre, but it makes sense as when you think about it as like damage. The result of damage is loss of life.
Right.
Not they are the same.
Okay. This makes me think of cards that drain my opponent that cause loss of life often is like, I don't know, Gary, Grey Merchant of Asphodel is like, the first thing that jumps to my head. Now, that would work, though, the way we want it to, right?
As far as I can tell. Yes, I verified this with a couple of people. Grey Merchant of Asphodel is obviously very powerful on its own, but with Bloodletter of Aclazotz, we got it. It is even better because when Gary enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black. Let's just say you have the Bloodletter and you have Gary.
So that's going to be 5 to each opponent.
Where X is your devotion to black, which is 5. So you gain life equal to the life lost this way.
So it would be 5, but it's 10 because of the Bloodletter. And then because the life lost was a total of 30, you would gain 30?
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
This is pretty good.
I mean, Gary's already pretty good. So.
And that's just with 2 permanents on the battlefield, right? Like usually when a Gary enters, you have 5, 6, 7 devotion to black.
Yeah. Presumably you have your commander. There's one more at least.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Yeah. Okay. So that's a pretty powerful interaction right there.
Yeah, and there's lots of things in black that do this. So it's like drain your opponents and you gain life equal to the life lost this way. Extort does that.
Oh, yeah.
Each opponent loses 1, you gain 3. But in this case, each opponent loses 2, you'd gain 6.
Wow, it makes Extort really good.
Yeah, for 1 mana that happens.
That just, oh man, that ratio starts to get broken.
Right. I mean, Exsanguinate, these are cards that are already great, just become even more lethal at like earlier, right?
Yeah, I mean, Exsanguinate already ends games all the time, so it can just end it earlier.
Yeah, because you need less mana to actually do it. Also, this applies to Kakusha the Evening Star, Dead to the Deathless. Very famous black win cons in Commander are even more powerful with the Bloodletter on the board.
This always happens when we're doing these shows where I think of something I didn't think of in the notes. I guess it's kind of related to our next segment, actually. Let's go on to our next segment, and I'll throw in my original thought that just hit me right now. And I'm like, I don't actually know how that works. Okay. So there's a bunch of cards that work with this in a way that's like, hey, it instantly kills a player or the players.
Yeah. These are all cards that have sort of worked with Wound Reflection and the Archfiend in the past, but here they kill you right now. There's no moment where they get to respond between the spell and remove the creature. The best one is Blood Tribute, I think. It's 4 black for a sorcery with kicker. Tap an untapped vampire you control. Oh, you have one of those.
Oh.
Target opponent loses half his or her life rounded up. If Blood Tribute was kicked, you gain life equal to the life lost this way.
So double the half, which is a whole, and they're dead.
And then you gain their whole life total.
That's like if you want to get out of the room, you swing the bat 3 times and you struck out and you're out. Yeah. Something like that. 2 halves make a whole. Yeah. So somebody followed along. I'm sure they did. Okay. So any cards that say, opponent or player loses half their life.
Right.
Will instantly, they're knocked out with the Bloodletter.
Yes, I believe so, because it rounds, as long as it rounds up.
Oh, if one of them rounds down, they might end up with one life or something.
Yeah, that's...
So if they're at 17, it would do 8, and then they'd be at 9, and it would do 4, so they'd be at 1. Yeah.
The best card with the bat is Fraying Omnipotence, which is 3 black for a sorcery. Each player loses half their life, then discards half the cards in their hand, then sacrifices half the creatures they control, round up each time. So normally that it would be like, oh no, I'm involved. But if they're all dead...
Yeah, because Bloodletter only affects opponents. So you would lose half your life, but everybody else would lose all their life. Yeah. In which case, you're sitting pretty.
Pretty good.
That's cool.
And that takes out all the players at once. That's a very serious curve. Turn 4, Bloodletter. Turn 5, Fraying Omnipotence.
Jeez Louise.
Game?
Yeah,
that's
back it up.
No ramp?
Yeah, back it up with one of those free counter spells and you're pretty much done.
Done.
Okay, well, you're going to do that once and then realize that wasn't that fun. Okay, here's a question this is the thought that came to me that I hadn't thought about when we discussed this previously and worked on the outline for a number of days. If you clone the Bloodletter... So if you have a clone or 2 of the Bloodletter, it stacks, right? It would be, if they're going to lose 10, they lose 20 instead they lose 40?
Yeah.
Okay, so the mere, loss of life feels like it's pretty good.
That seems pretty good.
Yeah. I guess you really want to be an Esper so that you can get Debt to the Deathless in there.
Debt to the Deathless. I mean, all you really need is Gary. I mean, and anything like the extort stuff becomes really brutal, and there's a lot of black creatures that have extort on them.
That's what I was thinking is Bloodletter, cloning, extort feels like it could get out of hand really fast.
You could even go Grixis and get Heartless Hidetsugu in there, and damage
just causes
loss of life.
Why not? Just go 5-color loss of life. Yeah, exactly.
I did want to mention the Tree of Perdition is a weird old card that is it's a plant that's a 0/13 with an activated ability that says tap, exchange target opponent's life total with Tree of Perdition's toughness.
So if they're at 40 and you tap this and you say, okay, now you're at 13 and the Tree of Perdition is a 0/40.
The game recognizes that you've lost 27 life in that exchange and says, oh, you'll lose another 27. And it will automatically take them out of the game with the Tree of Perdition. So as long as they're 26 or higher.
So any life total swapping, whatever the difference is from where they started and where they end up, they will consider that loss of life if it's less?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Because there's other cards that kind of allow you to switch players' life totals off in your own. But
move things around.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy. Okay.
It's pretty wild. I mean, there's a lot that you can do here. We look at it as sort of a traditional damage doubler, but loss of life doubling is so much more open-ended.
Yeah. Okay. That's very cool. Oh, that's a pretty good first one.
This card's super powerful. Again, those triple black is going to keep it out of some decks, but as long as you're a devotee, you'll be good.
All right. The next card got a lot of chatter online when it was first previewed. It's Bonehoard Dracosaur. Also did a lot of work in the Game Nights game that we played, Rachel. Okay. It is 3 red for a 5/5 flying first strike dinosaur dragon.
Cool.
At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. If you exiled a land card this way, create a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token. If you exiled a non-land card this way, create a treasure token. So it doesn't even matter if you play those cards. If you just exile those things, you just get the 3/1 and or the token for free. Now, you won't get 2 3/1s and you won't get 2 treasures, right?
I think if you exiled, you're right. So
it's not for each.
What you really want is to hit a land and a non-land, then you get both.
Yeah. Although if you hit 2 non-lands, then you have 2 spells that you have access to casting.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm
That's
okay with that as well.
Yeah, Dinosaur Dragon is an awesome creature type. It makes me think of like a horse donkey, like a mule.
It makes me think of a horse donkey.
Yeah, it's like some weird breeding has happened to create a dinosaur dragon.
They feel like they're related, like a horse and a donkey are got to be somehow related.
They're both dinosaur-y and /dragony.
Okay.
It's like a liger. He's like a liger.
He's a liger. Wow, that's a deep cut. Give me some tots. Okay, so I think when people read this, and when I first saw it in play, it has the same feeling, which is like, it does a lot.
It does a lot. It draws 2 cards. It could give you a treasure. It could give you a body. Plus, it's a super relevant attacker and blocker.
Yeah, it's got flying and first strike. It's a 5/5 for 5. Like, it seems pretty pushed on like all axes. Mm-hmm. So the cards we sort of compare it to Visions of Phyrexia, which is an enchantment. Outpost Siege was like an early iteration of this. Enchantments that kind of impulse draw you 1 each turn. Visions of Phyrexia can give you a Power Stone. There's a saga called The Flux from Doctor Who. But these are all cards that are not creatures, and they don't really even compare in the value category as far as like, yeah, they give you access to some extra cards, 1 in most cases, this is 2, and they don't do the like, hey, but also I'll just throw in a treasure sometimes and a 3/1 sometimes.
You know what this card kind of reminds me of is, it makes me think of like a Primeval Bounty or something, like Primeval Bounty is like, if you cast a non-creature, you get a thing. Yeah. And if you cast this, you also get a thing. And if you do that, you get a thing.
Like Waste Not or something too, where you're like, I did stuff. What do I get again?
Yeah. You get all this stuff and you're like, that must be good. And this is different. Like it gives you card advantage rather than like forcing you to do something to get the value. But I just don't know if this is if it'll play how it feels.
And how does it feel?
Like it feels like it's busted.
Yeah.
But like if you untap with it, you're like, I've got it all now. Yeah. But like what in reality, you've got a treasure, you've got a 3/1. I guess you've impulse drawn 2 cards, which is good. Yeah,
I think it's not as broken as it reads, but it is very good value.
Yeah.
I think impulse draw is one of those things where like impulse drawing 2 cards is better than impulse drawing 1 card, but it's not twice as good. And impulse drawing a 3rd card would not be 3 times as good, because at a certain point you won't be able to cast all those cards. So it's more selection the higher number you go. So I do think 2 is good, especially since, I can play a land, I can cast a spell if that's the way it comes down. But there's also downsides to impulse draw. It's not the same as drawing 2 cards, even though we kind of shorthand refer to that. If it's big stuff that you can't cast yet, or there's 2 things and they're both 6-drops, maybe you can only cast 1 of them, you don't get full value. Or maybe like, hey, I don't want to be casting a 6-drop this turn and just leaving my shields down, so I'm just going to cast things out of my hand. So I think from that aspect, if you sort of temper the over-exaggeration, I guess, then you kind of come down to like, it's good value, but it's not as insane maybe as you would think. I mean, getting treasures is great. 3/1s, I think I agree with you, are fine, but like, unless you're in a dedicated token deck, there's going to be limited ways for you to take advantage of it. It's just going to be like that shapeshifter you get sometimes for the black market connections, but you don't usually specifically need it.
This full sends all for you. You get the card, you get the treasure, you get the thing.
Oh man, I never thought of it like that.
It's 5 mana black market connection.
Never mind, I'm putting this in every deck now.
You don't have to pay any life.
It's a creature, so it's a little easier to remove than the enchantment version.
Yeah.
Which has its upside too.
Mana.
It can smack people for 5 in the air.
Yeah, that's true.
And also like makes you very hard to attack because it's 5/5 first strike.
It does so much.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, I look at it and I'm like, where does this go for me? Because it's a dinosaur, it's a dragon. You're like, I got to put it in my dinosaur dragon decks. But most of the time in those decks, you're trying to slam like 8 mana dragons rather than like 5 mana value dragons. But it comes out earlier.
Those decks are usually set up to like give haste, double enter the battlefield, because you know those decks naturally know like I'm trying to cast these huge things, and when I finally get my 8-drop out, I need to do stuff now.
Yeah.
And the Bonehoard doesn't. It comes in and then you have to untap with it, and that's when you sort of get your value out of it, which is just not on the same strategy path as a lot of these sort of big big mana decks are. I don't think that makes it bad, but it's an interesting sort of value piece that sits in a dragon slot in your deck.
Right. Yeah. I'm curious to see how it goes. I think I'm probably going to try it in Dragon's Approach. It does a lot of the things that I'm looking for out of my dragons, which is card advantage. And like I have Galazeth, so the treasure tokens are mana rocks. So maybe it'll find its place as like a mid-level, like a mid-game dragon there. But I'm curious to see how this actually feels in game. If people are like, oh, I really got the value out of like paying a 5 mana to get this thing to, get some stuff later.
Yeah, to me, that's the scary part, is I can see on turn 5 having 5 mana or turn 4 or whatever.
Yeah, you just don't want
looking at this card in my hand and being like, well, if I cast this, it's all I'm doing. And then it's like cast, cross fingers. And I have no ability to do anything else until I hopefully untap with this. And if I do, that's going to be great. But if somebody got rid of it, I'm going to feel really bad. Like my turn 5 or this turn, I just got totally time walked.
Yeah.
And that's the tough part about this. And then if you're playing it on turn like, a later turn, 8, 9, and saying like, I'm going to play this.
You hope to untap with it.
Yeah, the problem is you're so late in the game now that those advantages that you're getting, they don't have a lot of time to accrue and pay off. It's not like Black Market Connections, which you're going to play on turn, 3, and over the course of the game, it will have gotten you enough advantage to sort of justify itself. So yeah, Bonehoard, it sits in a weird place. I do think it's powerful, but there will definitely be times where you play it, it gets removed, or it just happens to catch the board wipe that somebody's aiming at somebody else because a lot of stuff's going on.
Yeah.
And then you feel kind of bad.
Yeah, and you're like, oof, all right, well,
Whereas if
new
you just
plan.
played a card that like entered the battlefield, drew you 2 cards right then, like just a Mole Drifter, you would felt better because it's like, well, it died, but I got my value.
Right. Interesting card. Curious to see where it actually winds up. This next one is sort of on the other end of the spectrum. They're small, they're interactive.
These
next two, that's true. I wanted to talk about these two together because they're doing a very similar thing.
They're super similar.
As soon
as you're like, we should talk about these two together, I was like, yes, we should.
Yeah,
that's good. Yep,
absolutely.
They're very close.
It is worth talking about both of them because they're both powerful in different ways in different decks. The first one is Dauntless Dismantler. It's 1 and a white for a human artificer. It's a 1/4. Artifacts your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. It has an activated ability that's XX white. Sacrifice the Dauntless Dismantler. Destroy each artifact with mana value X. Okay. So this card is in the main set. It's an uncommon. It only affects artifacts. And it also has this sort of board wipe thing on it. And then there's one in the vampire deck that is Charismatic Conqueror. 1 and a white for a vampire soldier. It's a 2/2 with vigilance. Whenever an artifact or creature enters the battlefield untapped and under an opponent's control, they may tap that permanent. If they don't, you create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. Okay.
So they're both sort of dealing with whether your opponent's stuff comes in tapped or untapped.
Yeah, they're like both tempo, hate bear type things.
Yep. Obvious comparisons to Blind Obedience, Authority of the Consuls, Thalia, Heretic, Cathar. There are differences, though. Most of those other ones, in fact, I think all those other ones do not give your opponent a choice.
Yep.
And then they affect different permanents. So Dauntless Dismantler only affects artifacts, does not affect creatures, which is quite a knock because...
Yeah.
The good side is, early in the game, mana rocks come in tapped, which is a pretty big blow to most decks that don't have green. And then later in the game, oftentimes either creatures with haste or you're just trying to get some blockers up after board wipes and removal have happened and the dust is settling and you're trying to get your feet set. And a lot of times you're like, okay, I just got to get this creature out here so I can't be attacked and then I can kind of, solidify my position here. Well, that's where a lot of times Blind Obedience is super annoying is because you're like, okay, anything I play is tapped. So that means they're going to have a lethal attack on me and I have to deal with it in a different way.
It can also shut down decks that are really reliant on haste, that are sneaking things into play, or the blitz decks that are, if they can't attack with creatures when they come in the battlefield, the deck needs to figure out a way to remove this permanent. So Dauntless Dismantler doesn't quite have that end of it. And yes, it makes treasures enter tapped in the late game. That's often very relevant. Big explosive turns are reliant on treasures these days, but it doesn't have as much utility as something like a Charismatic Conqueror, which applies anytime any artifact or any creature under your opponent's control enter.
However, in that scenario, they have a choice.
Yeah.
So, let's say they've got lethal on board. I got to get a blocker out. I'm just going to let you have the vampire.
Yep.
Which might be good, but not if you're the one that had lethal on board and was going to be able to kill them otherwise. In that case, you'd be like, I'd rather have Blind Obedience. Or let's say they get a sneak attack out.
Exactly. Like the Blitz deck and the Sneak decks.
So if they get a sneak attack out and they're like, yeah, cool, have 3 vampires, but you're dead now.
Yeah.
Because I'm just going to pay 3 red, put 3 dragons into play and smack you right now. Whereas, again, in Blind Obedience would just say, you don't have a choice. Those are coming in tapped and you can't attack with them. Dauntless Dismantler sort of gives you this consolation prize for not affecting creatures. That is, hey, there's a board wipe attached to this that you can, that you can push the button on sometime. How much weight do you give that? The destroy artifacts with mana value X or less. I mean, it's overcosted, right? Because you have to pay double X.
That's a lot.
Which I don't know, would you ever want to do it? So it seems like 2 and less is what you're gonna realistically be willing to do. Sort of Vandal Blasty. It does hit your stuff, so it's not exactly that. But get rid of all mana rocks.
I mean, I think that carries weight. It definitely varies depending on how much it hurts you. If you're playing green and you're relying on land ramp, then blowing up all the artifacts is great. Like tapping out to really set your opponents back matters. And you can do this at instant speed. But yeah, if I'm just playing white, I'm often reliant on mana rocks. I probably have my own treasures. This is a tricky thing to time. I think most often this is going to get used in an inconvenient time to blow up as many treasures as possible.
Just 1 white, boom.
Yeah. I think most of the time it's going to be like, oh, you have old Gnawbone. All right, you're going to make, 30 treasures at the end of your combat. I'm going to blow them up right now, and you better figure out how to use an instant.
Yeah, otherwise they're all gone.
Otherwise they're gone. So
that's interesting.
I think that's going to be where that plays the biggest role, or maybe you're really far behind and you can clip a couple of Soul Rings just by paying 3 mana. That makes a big difference. Other than that, I really don't think blowing up all the 2 mana rocks is worth it.
Yeah, I like what you said about green, though, because with Collector Oof and, a couple other things, green's pretty well poised to just be like, I'm not going to play a lot of artifacts because I just don't need them for ramp. And the upside for me is I can play cards like this and get huge advantages because somewhere in the early turns 4 or 5, I can set you all back 2 or 3 turns and not me. And that's a pretty big game, I think, for decks that can get away with it, where their strategy is not relying on very many artifacts. And this one's even targeted. If your artifact costs 3 or more, you don't hit it. So in some ways, it's even better than, Austere Command or something like that. So I see Dauntless Dismantler being, I don't want to say hardcore or competitive, but a little more serious.
It's a
game.
Stronger interaction piece.
Yeah, and when games are sort of less loosey-goosey, this is going to be better because it does what it does. Nobody's making any choices. Whereas Charismatic Conqueror will probably be not good in those circumstances, like we said, but will be good in circumstances where people are just having fun slinging spells around. They're like, whatever, I want to do my thing, so I'm not going to pay the 1. It's that kind of thing. I'm going to let you have vampires. And in those type of games where it's sort of more laid back and casual, you're likely to get a bunch of vampires. But I can see in our play group here at the office, the rest of the table, as soon as you play Charismatic Conqueror, turning to each other and saying like, hey, we're just going to not give them any vampires, right? And because that's annoying, we're going to also just attack them, right? And it's like, yeah, people kind of do that with Esper Sentinel or Aristic Study and things like that, so.
Yeah, Charismatic Conqueror has that sort of poke you in the eye problem where people are like, okay, I need whatever is doing that, I am removing it.
That's a good point, because you got to remind people, like, that's tapped, by the way, sorry.
Yeah, tapped.
Or do you want to tap it?
This is a question. This is a choice every single time. It's like, I make 3 treasures. How many of them do you want to come in tapped?
Yeah, do you want them to
Do you want 1 untapped, 2 tapped?
How many vampires do I get? I think that's how you say it.
Vampire check. Do you pay the vampire?
Do you?
It's I agree. Dauntless Dismantler is a heavy interaction piece. It's a permanent based interaction, where Charismatic Conqueror is more of an engine for the deck. It's like a token deck or a vampire deck.
Yeah, I don't see either seeing a ton of play. I think Charismatic Conqueror, ironically, will probably see a little bit more because Dauntless Dismantler feels more narrow. It only hits the artifacts. So it's kind of a hoser for artifacts. And it's like, if you're doing that, then you're already sort of in a more, I'm going to say more serious, play group, more optimized or more,
Even just interactive.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. We are moving on to, we've seen this card before.
Yeah, we really have. When I read it, I was like, wait, this is just, and then I looked up Tendershoot Dryad and I was like, yeah, it even, like if you just look at the text box, they look the same. Yeah, it is Illustrious Wanderglyph. It's 4 and a white for a 2/2 golem. It has Ascend. If you control 10 or more permanents, you get the city's blessing for the rest of the game. And Ascend you get it at any point you get 10 permanents.
And you have it forever.
Yep. Once you've got it, if you go down to 9 permanents, you keep City's Blessing. Okay. Other artifact creatures you control get +2/+2 as long as you have the City's Blessing. And then at the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature token. So this is exactly Tendershoot Dryad, except it says artifact creatures and gnome artifact creatures instead of Saprolings.
Yep. And it's in white.
Yeah. And Tendershoot Dryad is a card we say all the time.
It's great. It comes up in, obviously, Saproling decks. It comes up in token decks. This is a board in a box type situation. It's like if, the plants, Avenger of Zendikar, but slowly and a little bit sneakier.
Yeah. And for less mana.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's sneakier because it's very in your face. Okay, make it 3/3. And then you're like, your turn. Okay, make it 3/3. Okay, your turn. Okay, make it 3/3. And then everyone's going, we can't let that go on for very long.
That needs to stop. Otherwise, we're going to have a problem on our hands.
But I think one of the reasons you see it so much is because you don't really need any real specific strategy for that to be good. I've seen Tendershoot Dryads from decks that weren't even token decks, but it's like, that card's just good on its own. You don't need a ton of synergy with it. I mean, as long as your deck wants to attack with creatures, this is going to be good.
Yeah, it's like a teeny coma.
Yeah.
Not teeny, I guess it's 1 mana less. I mean, these kind of effects are very popular. Even at its $14 price tag, the Tendershoot Dryad still sees is in 30-40% of most popular commander decks.
It's that expensive now, huh?
Yeah, I know. Chatterfang, Jetmir, it shows up in high numbers in those decks. So I expect we're going to see a lot of Illustrious Wanderglyph, but there are some differences in it just making artifact creatures and having a more generic buff.
Yeah, it gives other artifact creatures you control get +2/+2 as long as you have the City's Blessing. I would say that's better than Tendershoot Dryad, which gives +2/+2 only to Saprolings.
Right.
And your average deck has a lot more artifact creatures than Saprolings in it.
Yeah, it's also Tempered Steel is an anthem that just says artifact creatures get +2/+2, and that card sees some play. And this is Tempered Steel plus, it fuels Tempered Steel. Whereas, if there's a card that says Saprolings get +2/+2, that is a very niche card.
Yeah, because you couldn't even play that in most token decks. You'd have to be very Saprolings focused.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
So, what I like about Illustrious Wanderglyph is it does all of the token stuff that we are used to with the Tendershoot Dryad, but it also has additional synergies just because you're making a ton of artifacts.
Yeah, this is a really good point that I didn't think about, but there's a lot of decks that care about how many creatures you have, and that's a token thing, right? Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of decks that care about just how many artifacts you have, or where are artifacts entering the battlefield you get to do stuff, or tap an artifact to do this, sacrifice specifically an artifact to do a thing. So Illustrious Wanderglyph has more, synergy way beyond what Tendershoot would have in decks like that. I mean, even there's a lot of decks that would just want a thing that just says make, a piece of scrap, an artifact that does nothing every turn, right? That would be interested in just I just need my artifact count to be high.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I was desperate for that kind of stuff in my Chiscoria deck. And obviously this can't go in a Chiscoria deck, but that kind of affinity for artifacts thing, the improvise you get from an inspiring statuary.
Oh, yeah.
All of that comes up with this card. And of course, there's Jahiras and things that just make tokens that tap for mana that work with the Tendershoot Dryad. But all of that stuff is doubled because it's both an artifact and a creature token.
Yeah, so this can go in the token creature decks, but it can also possibly go in the artifact affinity for artifact decks, Reckless Fireweavers and stuff like this card. So I think that's going to open it up. I think this will probably be, of all the cards we're going to talk about today, the card we see the most is my guess.
It's a ton of fun, and it's really uniquely good for white because white can has a new artifact creature synergies, can reanimate artifacts better and better these days. Plus,
white can also tutor for artifacts.
White can go find it.
Yeah. Whereas white can't really tutor for creatures. So I think this adds up to something that is going to be very powerful, and we're going to see a lot.
Very cool.
Very cool.
This next one's a little sweet, a little cutie.
A little sweet.
A little sweet, a lot sweet. I don't know. It's little, though. It's Inti, Seneschal of the Sun. They just look small because they're on this huge Triceratops.
I think that's just a normal sized person.
Like, you just look at the Triceratops and you're like, why is this a tutu? And it's because it's the person. This is 1 in a red for a legendary human knight. It's a tutu. Whenever you attack, you may discard a card. When you do, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature. It gains trample until end of turn. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card until your next end step. So there's like 2 big parts of this. There's like this counter thing that also gives trample on a 2-drop, which is fine, but we're probably here for the second clause.
Yeah, it's definitely the second clause. And the first clause is just a very sort of limited way to, at least in a box, all in one package, be able for this card to work with itself, right? Like, it's giving a reason that, okay, on this card, we'll let you be able to discard, a card every turn, ostensibly, if you can attack, to sort of get this second part. But for the most part, I think a deck that's including this will have a lot of its own ways to discard cards, right? To get the extra value here. Because, it really works like Riel. What was the other one we talked about? Containment Construct, those type of cards. In that it gives you additional value for discarding cards. It's not the exact same. Riel is obviously a lot better, but I would think of it in the same vein.
Yeah, it's worth noting it says whenever you discard 1 or more cards, exile 1. It doesn't work particularly well with wheels. It gives you an additional card, but it doesn't give you like 7 additional cards.
Yeah.
As
you really want a number of small instances of discarding, not discard 7 all at once kind of thing. Yeah.
Which red loves.
Yep.
Obviously, this is sweet with any like cathartic reunions and
Thrill of Possibilities. Faithless Looting.
I like it with Zerzoth Chaos Rider a lot because you're discarding and drawing all the time, and like the counters make it easier for devils. There's a lot going on.
Any cycling cards.
Cycling's real strong.
It's basically like Cycle Draw 2.
It's awesome with Faldorn Dreadwolf Herald that has an activated ability that says 1 tap, discard a card, exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn. And whenever you cast a spell from exile or a land enters the battlefield under your control from exile, you make a wolf. So now you're turning 1 card into 2 impulse cards into 2 wolves.
That's sweet.
Pretty good.
Smuggler's Copter, really good. I like anything that makes Smuggler's Copter better.
Ugh, such a fun card to play.
Yeah, it's great. If you've never played it, you don't understand that, like, just how smooth it makes your game. Even with no backup from the discard thing. And this has backup. And the great thing is, it's a 2-drop. So they both come out early, and Inti can crew the Smuggler's Copter to just get this going like pretty quickly. Yeah, I like that a lot.
When Inti comes down on 2, I do think this counter thing becomes a big problem because like commander players are not prepared to block stuff. So it like that early. If you get this on 2, you attack, you discard a card, you impulse draw something, you're attacking with a 3/3. Next turn it's a 4/4. You are getting a ton of advantage. It's not full Smuggler's Copter, but it does have a ton of value early. And it's not a dead, like it has a static ability late.
Yeah, and that discard a card to get the impulse draw. And when I say it smooths out your game, what I mean is like if you have too many lands, you get rid of lands. If you don't have enough lands, you get lands. And then you never have the Jimmy problem where you just don't hit your land drops, and you never have a flood problem either. And yeah, that is just very underrated in a style that I really like to have a lot of pieces in my deck that allow me to just kind of like make the choice in the moment to get myself on the rails, which on the rails generally means hit my land drops.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Another Containment Construct. I am all in.
Yeah, very cool card. All right, the next one also made a pretty big appearance on our Game Nights episode. It's Kitesail Larcenist. 2 and a blue for a 2/3 human pirate, has flying and ward 1. When Kitesail Larcenist enters the battlefield, for each player, choose up to 1 other target artifact or creature that player controls. For as long as Kitesail Larcenist remains on the battlefield, the chosen permanents become treasure artifacts with tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color, and loses all other abilities.
It's a weird little blue Grasp of Fate.
Yeah.
Kinda.
Minimus Containment you have down here is a card we had in white that turned a non-land permanent into a treasure.
Yeah.
Yeah, this gets around like indestructible because you are not destroying the thing. You are just altering what it is.
It's just something else now.
Transforming it. But it does effectively remove the thing. It gives them a little bit of a rebate, I guess you should say. In that, like, okay, I'm going to take away your thing. But, you know, you can use it for mana. You can get a mana out of it. So
yeah. It can't hurt that bad.
We have some lovely parting gifts for you. Yeah.
I will say I've played with Minimus Containment a lot because I played a lot of Baldur's Gate Limited.
Yeah.
And this feels worse as a removal spell than it looks. Because you look at it and you're like, oh, it's gone, and they'll sack it for mana and whatever. And you're like, it's Darksteel Mutation. It is not. It gives them mana back, and it gives them a way to sacrifice it. So it's especially bad when you're trying to like remove a commander, because now you have reduced the commander cost. It's basically a bounce, and you spent 3 mana to do it.
Yeah, you basically, they sack the thing, and that can pay for one of the 2 commander attacks that they're going to have to pay.
Yeah.
And also, one of the keys to Darksteel Mutation is it gets indestructible, and if they don't have a sack outlet, they can't even run it into somebody else's creature or block with it. They have trouble getting it back in the command zone, where this gives a ready-made way. Sack it, gets back in your command zone,
right.
You can get back on your feet. Yeah, so Kitesail Larcenist is really generally better to be used against non-commanders. But sometimes, whatever, put it back in the command zone. I'm just trying to slow you down.
Yeah. I think this is a great speed bump where it's just like, here's a problem for you to figure out. It's like either answer this 2/2 flyer that I don't really care about.
2/3.
2/3, excuse me. Oh my goodness.
Lives through shock.
It's the kite.
Yeah. It was just a sail.
Yeah.
It'd be a 2/2.
Pirates are 2/2s. The kite adds a little toughness there, I guess. It just gives them sort of a side quest where you're like, all right, I'll turn your Soul Ring into a treasure token, and you can like figure this out. So either you can sacrifice it, use the mana, that's fine. But I think there is this sort of hope that you remove the pirate before you have to sacrifice the treasure token. So it does become sort of an emergency button and not just like any old treasure.
Yeah, and we saw this in the Game Nights episode. If you haven't seen it yet, then this isn't a huge spoiler, but if you don't want spoilers, then cover yours or whatever. There was this interesting moment where I could destroy the Kitesail Larcenist, but if Prof put his commander under there, I would just leave it. I wouldn't destroy it. And so he had to decide to put his commander back into the command zone or not, or what to do with it, basically, before I would have to decide. So they will create these little mini games, and people can play that wrong. And I like cards that allow my opponents to make mistakes. Often, trust me, I make plenty of mistakes, so my opponents get to take advantage of it on the other end too. But allow them to kind of have hope, keep it around. Maybe somebody will destroy it, and therefore not just like bite the bullet, put the thing in the command zone, recast it. So there is that aspect of it where it's like, I don't want to blow this treasure because what if somebody kills that Kitesail Larcenist, which will sometimes have the effect that they don't get the even small advantage that they got back that rebate at all, because they're like, well, my Avengers Zendikar under there.
Yeah, I don't really want to just like crack it and send it to the graveyard. I want to figure out how to answer this pirate.
So I'll just leave it as a treasure, but then maybe the game ends and it's still a treasure, and they may as well have just got that mana at some point.
Yeah. The interesting thing about this card is you can turn one of your things into a treasure.
Oh yeah, that's why it says other target.
Yeah, so you can't turn the pirate into a treasure, but you could turn a stray clue token or food token or something into a little bit of mana. Which is a niche case. It's up to 1. You don't have to do that. But there's also this sort of weird, like, I'll hide a thing under there and like make this creature not a creature. There are some strange moments where I could see that being super relevant. It's like you've donated something terrible and now it's a treasure. Yeah,
or you've got a board wipe that you're going to do at some point and you hide a card under there so that when the Kitesail Larcenist dies, and I'm probably the one that's going to kill it because I'm going to board wipe, that this one thing I'm sort of saving. But your opponents might know what's going on, so just be a little careful.
Yeah. Neat card. And I do think of it as like a bump rather than like straight up removal, because they will. It is a little squishy.
I would compare it to bounce as well. And the way I think of bounces is pretty good removal. And what you really want removal to do, or what you're really expecting it to do, or what the realistic outcome is, that it slows your opponent down. It's not like, hey, this means they could never get their plan back online. And that's what Kitesail Larcenist will do too.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, right. We've talked about a lot of Magic cards. We're going to talk about even more. But first, we have a few words from our sponsors.
Okay, focus. We just got to find the right line.
Okay, yeah, so if I play Scorpion Strike, then you can boost with Vengeance of Ixalan.
Or I could play Incredible Strength and I could save Vengeance to discard later.
Yes.
This is not Magic. What are you guys playing?
This is KINFIRE Delve Vainglory's Grotto. It's a tactical card game where you play as adventurers descending into a dangerous lair. You use your unique skill cards to conquer challenges and reach the final boss.
Yeah, it's super easy to learn, but you have to play smart to win. You got to think about sequencing, resource management, threat assessment. really uses a lot of your skills for Magic.
Yeah, the entire box was only $20, and we've gotten a lot out of it. Takes about an hour to play, and each game is different than the last.
Ooh, and look at the cards.
Yeah, the art is really sweet, and check out that foiling on the back.
Right now you can play with 1 or 2 people, but that's going up to 4 next year with an expansion. It's really perfect for a commander pod, I guess. Yeah.
Nice. So why doesn't Jimmy just play coup de grace?
What? Oh yeah, that's way better.
Wait a minute, how did you...
Reading the card explains the card.
Order KINFIRE Delve Vainglory's Grotto right now at kinfiredelve.com and use code COMMAND10 at checkout for 10% off.
Again, that's kinfiredelve.com with code COMMAND10 or find it at your local game store starting November 21st.
KINFIRE Delve Vainglory's Grotto.
It's a whole lot of game for just $20. You know what every Magic player loves? A 2-for-1.
Ugh, getting that value over your opponents feels amazing.
Yeah, 2-for-1s are great. But you know what's even better value this holiday season? Mint Mobile. Right now, when you buy any 3-month Mint Mobile plan, you can get 3 more months for free. That's 6 months of premium wireless service for the price of only 3.
Whoa, a 6 for 3? So the legends are true.
Of course, with Mint Mobile, the value's already there. Plans start at just $15 a month and all come with unlimited talk, text, and data on the nation's largest 5G network.
Unlimited? That's like going infinite.
It's easy to switch over your old phone, and if you do need a new one, you can get 6 months of free service when you buy a select device and plan, but only for a limited time.
Limited time? We're on a 2-turn clock. We gotta act fast.
Exactly. So switch to Mint Mobile today and take advantage of their best deals of the year.
You know what magic term that sounds like?
What?
A win.
For a limited time, buy any 3-month Mint Mobile plan and get 3 more months free by going to mintmobile.com/command.
Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/command.
Hey, what you doing?
I wanted to give out some cool game nights gifts for the holidays this year, so I'm making custom GK throw pillows.
Nice, how's it looking?
Like this.
My God, is that our logo?
What? Drawing on pillows is hard.
Rachel, if you want heartfelt handcrafted gifts, you should just go on Etsy. Every year, I find independent sellers on Etsy to make gifts for friends, family, and business associates. Like those comfy game nights blankets the office got last year. I had them custom made on Etsy.
Oh, I love that blanket.
Yeah, I found cutting boards, wine stoppers. The options are endless. And for any budget, on Etsy, you're bound to find something totally unique and perfect for everyone on your gift list. We even use Etsy to make the Game Nights Live Championship belts and crown.
I won one of those.
You sure did. Do you mind if I see the pillow?
Yeah, do you like it?
I love it. It's gonna keep me warm in the winter, because I'm gonna burn it.
Josh! New to Etsy? Use the code HOLIDAY10 for 10% off your first purchase. Again, that's code HOLIDAY10. Maximum discount value of $50 expires December 31st, 2023. See terms at etsy.com/terms. For handcrafted and affordable gifts for everyone on your list, Etsy has it. Shop etsy.com.
All right, everybody, we are back. We are talking about the coolest, the most intriguing cards for the 99 from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. All right, we are on to our next card here. It is Matzalantli, the Great Door. All right, it's 3 mana for a legendary artifact. You can tap it to draw a card and then discard a card. So 3 mana for an artifact that just free loots.
Sure.
And then it has 4 and tap it, transform Matzalantli, the Great Door, and activate only if there are 4 or more permanent types among cards in your graveyard. Permanent types are artifact, battle, creature, enchantment, land, and planeswalker.
Okay.
So as long as you've got the right things in your graveyard.
4 different permanent types. Not particularly easy to do.
Yeah, not super difficult, though, I would say. It is permanent types, so there are some cards that just count types. Instants and sorceries won't count here. But as long as you've got that, it flips over, and it becomes the core, which is a legendary land. And it has an ability to tap and add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard.
Ooh,
so that's at least 4. Yeah, it's at least 4.
That's pretty good.
We should note, you have to tap the artifact in order to transform it, and it will transform tapped. So it will be tapped. Without untapping shenanigans from other cards going on, you won't be able to activate the core the same turn you transform into it. Which is kind of a big knock, because to me, my brain immediately thought of Azor's Gateway as the close analog to this, which is a card I quite like, but I realize is very glass cannon-y. And, you know, I've only flipped over maybe 7 or 8 times my whole career.
When you do.
Yeah, and I think I won almost all the games where it did flip over. Yeah, but it is similar in that it is kind of a looting. It's not the exact same on Azor's Gateway, but it's a form of loot, and it flips over in this thing that will create a ton of mana. Azor's Gateway flips over, and you can immediately use it.
Right.
It is harder to flip, though.
Right, because you have to like exile them under the Azor's Gateway. Basically, you have to activate the Azor's Gateway like 5 times. Tough.
Well, and it's often more because you have to have different mana value cards under there. But yeah, Matzalantli you can more easily set up. You can self-mill. It is also doing the looting, which is part, like, you can say, like, all I need is a Planeswalker in there. Okay, fine, I'm going to discard this Planeswalker with the ability from the artifact. So it gives you a lot of control over it. And honestly, the core's not very good until you've got a lot of permanents in your graveyard. So you probably want to do a lot of setup before you even flip it anyway.
The more I think about this card, the more I've been thinking about it as like a 7 mana tapped land, kind of, because you are going to want to do most of the self-mill in other ways. It's just cheaper than paying 3 mana to get 1 card in the bin. So being able to just mill this, play this, and then flip it, and you can flip it at instant speed, and then you'll untap with the land, that feels much more natural than like playing this on 3, using it as a looter, hoping it survives, and then like sorcery speed flip it later. Because you do want to be developing a board. This doesn't really further your board in any other way. So I could see this be in like self-mill strategies that are interested in self-milling anyway, specifically like built around not a super narrow type. Like if you're an artifact deck, it's going to be pretty tough to get like the Planeswalker or the Battle or the Enchantment even in the graveyard. So, but then once you've flipped it, you've got this huge, very powerful tapped land that you have some use for.
Yeah, it has to be a self-mill deck because it won't be a big enough payoff to go through the hoops unless it taps for like, you know, around 10 or something.
Yeah, you don't really want it to tap for 4. You've invested 7 mana in it.
Yeah, which is a ton for basically a land. You made the point, and I didn't think about this, but they can remove the artifact with the transform ability on the stack.
So
it's
brutal.
not like a morph, right? How like it transforms and you can't interact with it. It's a state-based action or whatever. No, this is like activate, goes on stack.
Can I
activate? Does it transform? Does the transform resolve? And they're like, nah, I'm going to naturalize that thing. And you're like, oh.
Okay.
So now I'm 7 mana deep and nothing happened.
Yeah. Really, really rough.
Yeah. So I think watch out for that. But I like what you said. I think this is, if you can find a spot to play it out, looting every turn's pretty good.
Yeah.
You can get a lot of value off that. And so that can be a not embarrassing thing that you did in the game. And like, if you can flip it, if you can find a spot, at some point when you have the right amount of permanence in the graveyard, then that's the upside of the card. And I think if your deck operates enough at instant speed too, you can be like, you're a little later in the game and you're just kind of leaving mana open and weighing your options, and maybe I'll Sublime Epiphany, but maybe I'll flip this thing if it looks pretty clear out there. Yeah. And, you know, and then if you untap with the core and it's tapping for 10 plus, like you're going to win that game.
You better have a plan. Yeah, I really liked that this is sort of like, when the Celestis was printed, they're like, it's a mana rock that incidentally loots. And we were all like, cool. And then we were like, oh, yeah. Day and night, though.
The day and night is just a pain in the butt.
Probably not.
It's just not worth it.
It's just not worth the bandwidth of like remembering and making all your opponents remember. So I like that there's one that suggests the Celestis without necessarily introducing a new game.
Day and night is just like not worth it. I one thing to mention here is if you have a lot of untappers in your deck, this also becomes a lot better. And that's where I play Azor's Gateway. Is I have a Tim deck, has a lot of untapping going on, and that's why I've flipped it a number of times, is because you don't go like tap it once, next turn tap it again, next turn tap it again. You go tap it once, tap it a second time, no one's worried about it. Tap it, tap it, tap, 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 tap it, flip it. Tap the land for 40. Untap it, tap that land for 40 more, float 80 mana. People are like, what the hell? And it's like, yeah, because you didn't see it coming, because I can untap things.
Right. The first couple of times they'll ignore you, but if you can just race over that finish line, huge. Catch them unawares.
Okay.
All right. I like this one. This is one of my favorite arts in the set. It's Ojer Pakpatiq, Deepest Epoch. Excuse me. 2 blue for a legendary creature god. It's a 4/3 with flying. Whenever you cast an instant spell from your hand, it gains rebound. Rebound, it says, exile it as it resolves. At the beginning of your next upkeep, you may cast it from exile without paying its mana cost. When Ojer Pakpatiq dies, return it to the battlefield, tapped and transformed under its owner's control with 3 time counters on it. So like the other gods, this has a temple on the back. It has tap, add blue, remove a time counter from the temple, and then 2 in a blue, transform the temple. Activate only if it has no time counters on it and as a sorcery. Okay. There's a lot. these cards are so long.
Yeah, it is. And this is one of the more simple ones.
Yeah.
All these gods turn into lands on the other side. A lot of the transforming is into lands.
Right.
Okay, so that first part, instants get rebound, which is basically like you get that thing twice.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as your deck is full of proactive instants, this is great. Obviously, if your deck is full of counterspells, the rebound doesn't do anything for you. But if you're casting Mystic Confluences and Factor Fictions and like Nexus of Fate.
God, Nexus of Fate.
Which is an instant speed extra turn.
Yeah, that's good. That's another game you're going to win.
Yeah, that seems really powerful.
Yeah, I think you have to look at your deck. This is obviously, we're talking about it in the 99. So this is a deck you already have that exists that has 20 plus instants in it already. And those aren't 20 plus non-counterspell instants because a rebounded counterspell doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
So that's really what you're looking for. And if your deck meets that criteria, this card's going to be a banger because it's card advantage, but it's also like tempo and mana advantage because Nexus of Fate is a bad example.
Yeah,
that's just
so
too
powerful.
broken. But if you Mystic Confluence, not only did you sort of virtually draw a second Mystic Confluence when it rebounds in, you also got the 5 mana to cast it. So it gives you a ton of value. So any instance you cast, doubling them up, not just in the way of like getting the effect, but that card advantage is huge.
Yeah, I really like if you're going to play this, running the counterspells that are modal.
Yeah.
So running like the Mystic Confluence or Sublime Epiphany that we brought up already, or like a Cryptic Command.
Yeah.
Then you get to choose the modes where you still have the counterspells that you can cast as counterspells, but then you get alternate modes that are drawing cards, bouncing permanent stuff that you can use off of rebound.
Yeah, that's a really smart way to go. It gives you still your ways that blue interacts the best, which is counterspells, without sort of making it so that you have a bunch of cards that don't work with this card.
The other cool side of this card is like, obviously, if you're running all these blue instants or any instance, then awesome. But this also really works well with cast from exile synergies because it gives you a way to cast it from exile for free. So I liked mentioning like Delayed Blessed Fireball with this card. Because we've talked a lot about this card.
Delayed Blast Fireball is, if you're not playing it,
so sweet.
You're doing it wrong. It's so good.
Delayed Blast Fireball, you have to cast it from your hand in order to get this rebound, so it could be a little strange there, but then you get the free 5-1 for like without paying anything. So you pay 3, you deal the 2 damage to everybody in all their faces, then it exiles and rebounds and casts as a 5.
Sucks because I'm like, okay, I don't want to play anything.
You can't rebuild. You know it's coming.
Because you're just going to do that. So what am I supposed to do?
Yeah,
that's just brutal. I guess I'll do nothing. Go.
It also gives you like a little bit of reward from casting from your hand in those cast from exile decks. So like Vega the Watcher is a really cool deck for it, I think. That's the whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, draw a card. It's that little owl from Call Time.
Yeah, this is a cool design. I like the card.
I like it a lot.
It is hard to flip back over.
Yeah.
If it's your commander, which we're not talking about, but if it is... when it dies, you can just put it in the command zone rather than letting it become the land. But when it's in your 99, that's going to happen. But I would say that, like, hey, just a card that's 4 mana and does this, you would play it. So the fact that it turns into a land is just gravy. It's ramp, gets you an extra land, and if it does happen to flip back into the thing, that's just a bonus. But you would play the card. I would only play the card in a deck where I would play the card if it just died and went to the graveyard like a normal card.
Right. Yeah. But you could blink it with Ghostly Flicker, which is kind of cool.
That's true. If it's a land, Ghostly Flicker is pretty good for all these gods to flip them back to their god side.
Right back front. Speaking of gods.
And this is the most talked about card in the whole set for sure, bar none. It is Ojer, Deepest Foundation. 4 white for a 6/6 legendary creature god, has vigilance. If one or more creature tokens would be created under your control, 3 times that many of those tokens are created instead. When Ojer dies, return it to the battlefield, tapped and transformed under its owner's control. It turns into a Temple of Civilization, which is a land that taps for white, or you can pay 2 and a white and tap it, transform Temple of Civilization back into Ojer. You can only activate if you have attacked with 3 or more creatures this turn, and only as a sorcery.
Triple!
We are I'm calling it now. We're in the era of triple. We are leaving double behind. The Bloodletter.
We will triple no more.
We're going to have triple loss of life replacement effect soon.
It's an 8 mana.
We will double no more. We will only triple.
We're done.
In Magic in the year 2050, parallel lives no longer exist. There's a 2/0 green enchantment that says triple your tokens.
I mean,
it costs less.
Somehow it costs less. Yeah, I mean, Nyx Bloom Ancient really kicked off this era, right?
Fire Emancipation, they were sort of the lead dogs, and now,
and now we are here. We are tripling tokens in white for 6 mana. That's a lot.
Yeah, we're lower on this card than almost everybody else.
Yeah, it makes me sad because I want to be excited about the cards everybody is excited about, but I want to talk about, like, you and I aren't super high on Fiery Emancipation or City on Fire. These are damage triplers.
Or Nyx Bloom Ancient.
Like because these are 7 mana, 8 mana, 6 mana permanents that don't do anything when you cast them. You have to have something else going on for them to be powerful. And
at least Fire Emancipation, I'll say you can then do like a attack or whatever. Even then, I think most people that have it in their deck shouldn't be playing it, but at least
it's like an overrun in red in that way.
This one is 6 mana. Now make some tokens.
Right.
That's hard to do after I've spent 6 mana.
I spent 6 mana.
Yeah.
You didn't do the thing.
Yeah.
Do the thing.
So you got to be like, hold on, I will make some tokens. I need my mana to come back. Yeah, I need to untap.
Yeah, it's so expensive, and then it asks you even more of you later. It has the displaced dinosaur problem that we were talking about, where you're like, this card is awesome, but I cast 7 mana to get a dinosaur. I wish I wish you would do something other than be a 7/7. It's tough to pay 6 mana and then do anything in Commander.
Yeah, and the good point about this is because the obvious comparisons to cards that are currently being played are Mondrak, the Dominus, Anointed Procession, Parallel Lives, which I already mentioned, the doublers, right?
Right.
This is one step, 50% more than that, one step past that. And the question is, those cost 66% of the mana, right? 4 instead of 6. And how much worse are they really? Is there a huge difference between me making twice as many tokens as 3 times? If I cast a spell and it makes 4 tokens and I get 8, is 12 a lot better than 8? It doesn't feel like it is. It feels like it's just both are good and both are likely to kill my opponent. And I didn't need to sort of pay the additional setup and stick my neck out even further for the Ojer talk as I did just have a Mondrak.
Yeah, it's also easier to kill Ojer to talk, excuse me.
Ojer Mondrak.
Yeah,
that's 6 times. That's the year 2075.
Soon,
yeah.
Phyrexian Ixalan gods. It's harder to kill Anointed Procession and Mondrak because Mondrak has this indestructibility clause, and Anointed Procession is an enchantment. So it's you're sticking your neck out and you're promising something so much scarier.
Yeah, it's true.
And then it's not protected, right? There's no ward or anything. No, nope. It flips into this land, which you may or may not be able to flip it.
Yeah, it's a setup card, but the setup is more precarious,
right,
than the setup for the other ones. Yeah, when you stick it, it's going to be cool, but when you don't, it's going to feel worse. And there's a big difference between I wasted my turn 4 or my 4 mana on a thing than I wasted turn 6, because we're at the point now in the format where somewhere around 8 mana or 7 mana, when people have access to that amount of mana, is where game-winning moves start to happen. So it is very hard to be 6 mana, that's all I can do, go. And I hope that not only do I untap with this, but you don't make such big moves that I'm so far behind that I can't even win from here. So yeah, I don't know about you, but it's hard for me to play Commander anymore to just play a 6 mana thing and not leave some kind of interaction open.
Yeah.
It just feels like I'm more likely to lose. So I have to the only time I can play a 6 mana thing is when I have 8 mana, so I can leave 2 mana open to be able to interact because they might kill me. But then it's am I really going to wait until I have 8 mana to play the Ojer talk and then hope I untap? And then at that point in the game,
it feels so much slower. And I wanted to talk about this because people are really excited about this card, and I was like, where is this worth it? Where is 6 mana to make triple the tokens worth the 2 extra mana? And what I was thinking is, if your commander makes more than 1 token at a time, then the tripling starts to add up. Like if I have a Hazizon Shaper of Sand deck, where if I play a desert, I make 2 Sand Warriors. If I have the doubler out, I make 4, and like 2 and 4 is a lot. Anointed Procession is very powerful in this deck. But if I have a tripler out, the difference between 2 and 6 is like a very meaningful difference. That's the difference between like 2 jump blockers and an attacking army. So I could see that if you're making like, if your commander ETBs and makes a bunch of tokens or something like that, then the triple really does add up more than the doublers do.
Well, I like Hazazon as an example because it's a non-mana way to make tokens, and that's what I would look for in my commander. I don't want an ETB because I have to cast that, and there's
that too, yeah.
The likelihood I have extra mana after my 6 that I paid for Ojer is very low. But I could see a scenario where I haven't played my land for turn, I cast Ojer and I play a desert, and now I get my 6 tokens, and that feels like okay for a turn. Because if they kill Ojer, I'm still good. I got some value,
right?
And I can also flip it back over with the tokens that I just made.
Right.
Whereas if it's like an ETB effect, I have to play Ojer and do the thing where we wait for the untap, which I think people know we don't like to do for good reason. So yeah, I think there are situations where Ojer is going to be good. I just think the broad application, most of the time, Annoying Procession, Mondrak are going to be better. And then you're starting to ask yourself, well, if I have access to a bunch of these, if I'm in green, I got Parallel Lives, Doubling Season. We don't even really play Doubling Season anymore, except in Planeswalker decks, because for 5 mana, it's not worth doubling your tokens. You can do it for cheaper. And so how many of those effects do you even want in a deck? It's not 10. It's probably not 5. So does this bump out Annoying Procession, Mondrak, Parallel Lives? Probably not. And then you're like really thinking, well, do I want another one?
Yeah.
So the moral of the story is the price tag on this card right now, I don't think is worth it, and I would advise against it. Yeah.
It's going to do some super sweet things, and there's going to be games where you're like, this card won me the game! And you're like, ask yourself if Anointed Procession would have won you the game also. It's sort of the difference in Commander between using like a hammer to hammer a nail or using a jackhammer to hammer a nail. where you're just like, it's a little bit harder to use the jackhammer and it gets it nailed.
And a lot of times the jackhammer will do more damage than it will.
Exactly.
You know? It'll
makes
hurt
people
you
go,
more often
ah!
than, exactly. And there will be games where Ojer causes you to lose because you played it, it got removed, you basically wasted that turn. Yeah, yada yada. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get yelled at for that one.
Probably.
This is the type of card that people are like, Josh is no fun.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Josh is no fun. He doesn't listen. I can only give my true opinions on what I think the cards are.
I'm excited to hear opinions of this next card. So let's get into it. It's a little bit simpler. It's Pit of Offerings. This is
a little bit simpler. It still has 5 lines?
1, 2. It has 2 activated abilities. It's a cave. It's a land-cave. It says Pit of Offering enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters, exile up to 3 target cards from graveyards. It taps to add colorless, and it taps to add 1 mana of any of the exiled cards' colors. ETB, exile 3 cards from any graveyard, including your own, and as long as the exiled thing gets exiled with this, then it's mana fixing.
As long as that thing you exiled has color as well.
And it has color, that too.
Yeah, because lands don't have color, and a lot of other cards
artifacts
don't have
yeah.
If
you exile like a commander from the command zone, it goes to the command zone. It doesn't stay under this.
Yep, there's that too. But they would have had their commander in their graveyard, which doesn't happen that often.
Yeah.
I'm assuming if you did that, they're disappointed about it.
Yeah, for sure.
You have Bojugabog next to it.
I mean, that's the conversation, right? Is like, this is a tapped land that is graveyard hate. This is colorless.
Right.
So, I mean, the other conversation is the desert one, which I should know. Scavenger Grounds.
Yep.
Yeah, should know it. Have a desert deck. Told you that.
Scavenger Grounds gets rid of everything in all graveyards, but costs a bunch of mana.
It's 2 to activate, and then you have to tap it, and you exile everything.
Yeah, you got to sack it too, right?
Yeah. So it gets exiled in the exile.
Yep.
So those are the 2 comparisons that are being made with this card.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, Rachel's higher on this card than I am, but I understand why you're higher on it because it is graveyard hate. Yes. And we're always looking for graveyard hate that doesn't impact the rest of our deck building, right? Because it's boring and it's not fun. And, there are games where it's completely useless to have cards that are just like, I do stuff to graveyards. and that's all I do. And you're like, that kind of feels bad because nobody cares about their graveyard this game. So this card is just doing nothing.
Yeah.
So when it's on a land, it feels better because, hey, I'm tapping this thing for mana. And it says, I had to have lands in my deck.
Yeah.
So
We don't want to play lands anyway. Might as well.
unless you're Jimmy.
Just cut a land.
Then you don't have to have lands
to
in
put
your
in
deck.
your Soul Guide Lantern. Yeah, that's my favorite thing about this is like I really struggle to put graveyard hate in my decks. And I like that this is just another slot that goes into more decks because Bojuka Bog goes in every black deck.
Yes.
This does not go in every non-black deck.
Great. A bold statement, hot take.
Because it's not like answering 3 cards is not the complete exile, obviously, that Bojuka Bog does. And it's a colorless land most of the time. I've seen a lot of conversations about this online where they're like, oh, it taps for all your colors. And you're like, it's not going to be likely that you're exiling relevant things from a graveyard and they're in your colors and they're in the graveyard at the time that you have to play this land. That's a lot to ask. So I think most of the time this is either going to be a colorless land that comes in tapped, which feels terrible, or it's going to be like it taps for maybe one of your colors. It comes in tapped. It picks off like a couple of flashback spells and one big thing in a graveyard.
Yeah, my big issue with this card is you don't get to choose when you draw it, and it will be in your opening hand sometimes.
Yeah.
And it'll be a part of your land count for your deck. Because if you put it in a spell slot in your deck, like we recommend for like a Temple of the False God, I don't think you should be doing that with this card. Because then you're saying, well, this is a spell as a graveyard hate spell. And it's like, well, then in that case, if you're counting it as a spell, just put a graveyard hate spell in. So it's got to fit as one of your lands. But the problem is, in your opening hand, it's for sure just a tapped waste because there's nothing in graveyards yet. And anything that's in a graveyard is a fetch land at that point because
doesn't tap for any
which
colors.
doesn't give you any colors. So that's the part I don't like about it is it's a mulligan kind of in an early hand, or it's going to cause you to want a mulligan. And so it does look decent, I think, when you consider the scenario where you draw it on turn 5 and 6, and you're like, okay, cool, now there's stuff in graveyards, and I know that person's likely to play in their graveyard, and I know these cards are kind of bad, and I can pick off certain things, which is even better than Bojuka Bog in some ways. And so that scenario I'll give you is really good, but I don't know that to me that's worth the downside of it's in my opening hand, and I only have 2 of my 3 colors, or I maybe only have 2 red and this, and I'm a red-green deck, and like it's like, what am I supposed to do here? I feel bad about keeping this hand. I might be in trouble, and this Pit of Offerings is just going to come down and get rid of something I don't even care about. See, the great thing about Bojuka Bog is you're totally fine playing it turn 1 as like a tapped black source, and you're just like, it's in my opening hand, but
It is what it is.
It is what it is, but it's going to help me cast my spells.
So I think we all know this is worse than Bojuka Bog, but is this better than Scavenger Grounds?
Yeah.
Which is also a colorless land.
Yeah.
So my thinking here is that I don't love Scavenger Grounds. I think it's a bit of a nuclear option. It costs you a ton of mana to like interact with your opponent's graveyards, and it's a colorless land. Like the mana base in Hazizan is a disaster because it's full of deserts.
Yeah.
They're all colorless. And he's a 3 mana commander in 3 different colors. Impossible to fix in this deck because it's full of these interactive cards.
Right, but you wouldn't put Pit of Offerings in the Hazazon deck.
No.
Because your mana's already iffy.
It's already a mess.
Yeah.
So I think where I would be putting Pit of Offerings is places that I already put Scavenger Grounds, which is in monocolored or maybe 2-color decks.
So you think you just straight replace it?
I like it better in certain ones of those decks than Scavenger Grounds because it's just free.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost me a big tempo hit to interact.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't play a ton of Scavenger Grounds because, like you said, you can't be playing in your graveyard really to use it. 2 things I'll say in Scavenger Grounds' favor, and I don't know where I land on which one's better, honestly, thinking about it, is it's untapped. Yeah. Which is a big deal.
That's a big deal.
I don't like to have more than 5 or 6 lands, and 0 if I can help it, that come in to play tapped at all in the decks. Because you just find, lots of games where you're just trying to hit your land drops, and you're like, I need any land, and then you draw the tap land, and you're like, okay, play it tapped, and now I just have to pass the turn. Yeah.
That happened today.
Yeah. So there's that. And then also there's a threat of activation on Scavenger Grounds that I find to be useful in that people playing with their graveyards, they know you've got it. If you have the mana up, they can't go to make the move, but you don't have to use it. You just have to have the ability to use it. And I think this works better for me because I do play a lot of reactive decks that are just holding their mana open and making decisions, at instant speed. So, I know your style is definitely more like put a bunch of stuff out and, use my mana now. And so, I can see. And how does that line up with Pit of Offerings, which admittedly is more pinpoint, it's more tactical. I don't know. I think both of them are not Bojuka Bog.
They're not Bojuka Bog, that's for sure. It's tricky. I wonder if 3 is enough
if it was like 5.
Yeah. I wonder if it meaningfully interrupts graveyard decks enough. Because the big thing about graveyard decks is that they have all of this selection, right? And you're trying to be no selection.
Yeah.
And if you're all right, I'll take your 3 best options, they still have their 4th through 10th best option, which is pretty good.
Yeah. Even Bojuka Bog, I've played in games where I bogged somebody a graveyard deck and they managed to get going again and still win.
Yeah.
Which I like about Bog. I don't like the ones that just perpetually turn your
rest in peace and stuff.
Yeah. Those are a little too mean, but I like okay, boom, you've got nothing, start over. It'll take you a turn or two, but you can get back in this thing and hopefully I can win by the time you do that. So Pit of Offerings could, if it's only 3, it might not even affect them at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard. I don't know. I'm going to have to see it in play. I think my inclination is probably not to play it until I see you do cool things with it.
Yeah,
we'll okay, see. It's better than I thought.
Yeah, I like the idea of it just picking off some flashback spells and just being an incidental interactive piece. But I agree. There's going to be some hands that I'm absolutely screaming at. So we'll see. If you played Pit of Offerings, please let us know. I'm very curious about it.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to see it played enough that we have an average case in our head of most of the time I see it, it's relevant.
Yeah.
Or if most of the time I see it, it doesn't really do anything, then it's not worth it.
Yeah.
All right, the next one is interesting. It is drawing some highfalutin comparisons. It's Redemption Choir, 2 white for a 3/3 vampire cleric with lifelink. It has Coven. When Redemption Choir enters the battlefield or attacks, if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Permanent card. So the highfalutin comparison is Sun Titan. Sun Titan!
I mean, that is the text of Sun Titan, right? It's ETB, it's attack. That's it. It just has that little word in italics.
That Coven.
That makes it a little different.
Yeah. We'll talk about the Coven of it all because it is definitely a hurdle. But yeah, this is on the surface, a possible 4 mana get the same effect as this 6 mana thing.
Mm-hmm. This beloved, powerful thing in Commander. And I mean, we've talked so much about the difference between the 4 mana Anointed Procession and the 6 mana Ojer Tak.
Yep.
And
this is in the reverse,
This
right?
is it.
Yeah.
This is the 4 mana Sun Titan that we're being offered here.
This is our 3 mana Parallel Lives in the year 2057.
That's when they go back to doubling after the
but
tripling.
Cheaper.
There are a couple of big differences between Redemption Choir and Sun Titan. Of course, it is only a 3/3, so it's not as formidable as of an attacker. It doesn't have those free attacks that Sun Titan can get sometimes if it doesn't need removal immediately.
I was going to say, how many times have you even seen a Sun Titan attack? It happens,
I've
but it's
attacked
rare.
with it.
But it's rare.
If I have Greaves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but you're right. 6/6 is a lot bigger than 3/3. So if it's your attack step and Sun Titan can attack, you can find somebody to swing at where it's safe.
Yeah.
A 3/3 maybe not, but you might not care. Whatever, trade it, chump attack or whatever. I get another thing.
Yeah.
Might be worth it.
And it's 4 mana, so you can cast this and you can hold up interaction. You can remove one of their double blockers.
Yeah.
You could bounce something. This leaves you a little bit more flexible than Sun Titan does, which is paying 6 mana to cast a Sun Titan just to get 1 fetch land back. You're well, not my best use of 4 mana. Yeah.
But if I untap with it,
it's going to be great.
I'm going to get a second fetch land. That is one thing I really like about Redemption Choir, because Sun Titan, it's too late in the game generally for the fetch land part to matter, but this feels like it could be used legitimately as ramp to get a fetch land, or just a land you've discarded in some other way back onto the battlefield. And this sneaky white ramp that we talk about a lot is a way for... There's enough now to keep up with green decks almost, if you sort of play your cards right. So I do like that aspect of it. The question sort of becomes, how hard is it to get Coven? Because without Coven... It's a 4 mana 3/3 lifelink. That's it.
Not good.
But that's a very possible thing to happen because the whole point of being less mana is you can play it earlier, but playing it earlier is in contention with the fact that it is harder to have 3 creatures with different powers. Well, this counts as one of them, so you could have 2 other creatures. But still, turn 4, you have to have 2 other creatures with different powers to get the ETB at all.
Probably like 0, 1, or 2, right? Like before 4, it's going to be very difficult for you to have any other power that is not 3. And it's like, even in my decks, which are very creature dedicated and are like play aggressive creatures to wear equipment to like get moving, it's going to be tough to hit on 4.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll probably have 2 on 4, but the fact that it doesn't do anything on ETB if you don't have 4 creatures means that I'm probably not playing this on curve most of the time. Because like I'll play, you know, my Selfless Spirit or something that's like the 2/1 flyer. And that'll be great. If I have my commander that's maybe a 4/4 or makes 1/1 tokens, then we're getting going maybe 5, you know.
How much of a disaster is it to play this on 4 and then the next turn play a creature that gets you up to Coven so you attack on, you know, your 4th or 5th turn and get the attack trigger at least, but you didn't get the ETB? Do you think that is like a use case where this card wasn't worth playing, or do you think that's still acceptable?
I think that's still acceptable most of the time. I don't think this is going to flag as scary as Sun Titan, which is funny because it's Sun Titan, but 4 mana.
But Sun Titan says, Sun Titan!
Exactly. That's the thing, is he has this big golden shield.
You're like, we got to kill that guy.
You got to kill that. That's got to be really good.
This is Acquire.
Genuinely, I think people remove Sun Titans way too fast these days.
Yeah.
But
at least ask what's in the graveyard before you...
just relax. All right? I've had my Sun Titan removed immediately, and you're like, they have a Goldsmith Dragon. The fact that it gives you... It doesn't flag as much because people aren't going to know what the card is for a little while, and that it's just smaller. It's not going to hit you super hard, means that you might be able to be like, hey, will you take 3 so I can ramp this land and I'll use spend my card and remove that thing? Like, you can probably bargain through attacks better than like, hey, will you let me hit you with my Sun Titan?
I feel like most games, a 3/3 attacking, a 4-mana 3/3 attacking sort of as early as it could, you'll be able to find one player.
Yeah, it's
most
an inconvenient block at the very most.
Yeah, they might have their commander out, but you can threaten to trade with it, and they're not going to do that. So, yeah. I think I like what you said there, and I think I was thinking about the card wrong, because in my brain, I wanted to get the ramp out of it, and the ramp's only good early, so my brain was saying, like, oh, in order to optimize this, I have to play it on curve. And in order to play it on curve, I have to have Coven on curve to get the land so that I can do what I want. And that's then when you do that calculation, like, that's not really possible. I mean, there are scenarios, like if you had partner commanders that just happen to have the right things and you can sort of guarantee, or even one commander that's like a low drop that gives you like one of the slots, and then your deck is chock full of creatures, that are 2 drops with, your commander's 1 power or 2 power, and you have a bunch of 0 or 1 power things. Or maybe even some, I don't even know how you'd get 4. You'd have to have like weird 4/2s. That doesn't seem possible. It is very hard once you start breaking it down. Anyway, I like what you said in that. I think if I just switch it in my head and say, oh, no, I would play this in a spot where I would play Sun Titan. So later on in the game, I'm thinking turn 6 or 7 to get some kind of advantage. Maybe it's a land, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's, a 3 CMC thing. So I'm really getting good value out of this, right? I pay 4, I get a 3 thing, so I get 7 mana worth of stuff, and the upside being I'm not vulnerable in the way we were talking about with Ojer Talk. I have my 2 or 3 mana up, so I had a good turn, a good productive turn. I added to my board. I'm threatening next turn to get another thing back even. I brought something important back, and I'm holding up interaction to make sure that your turn is not disastrous for me, or somebody's turn isn't. So I didn't just totally shields down. So I think that play pattern actually does make me like this card quite a bit better, with the caveat that you have to have 25 creatures in your deck to play this thing, right? Or your commander like has a certain power and makes tokens of a certain power, or your partner commanders, you're guaranteed to get Coven somehow. The
Coven is not a non-issue. You need to really reckon with that and figure out how you're going to get there. That being said, I do think this is awesome in Blink decks and should replace Sun Titan in every single Blink deck right away.
Sweet, yeah.
Because
it comes down earlier.
It comes down earlier. You can you still get the ETBs. You're going to have all the creatures.
And
you want that mana open for Blink activations and all of that. So I think that's where we're going to see the most of Redemption Choir. Don't place your Sun Titans just yet, but take a look.
Poor Sun Titan will be so sad if it's
I'm never cutting Sun Titan. That's my boy. He's so fun. I joke about it being like not that powerful, and it is my favorite thing in the world.
It's still powerful.
It's so good.
There's a reason it still sees a lot of play. Yeah. All right, you want to read the next one?
Yeah, this next one's a little bit more narrow, but we wanted to mention it. It's Ripples of Potential. 1 and a blue for an instant. Proliferate, then choose any number of permanents you control that had a counter put on them this way. Those permanents phase out. Obviously, this is really powerful in +1/+1 counter decks. If your creatures have counters on them, this card's great. But I wanted to mention it because there's some super cool applications in Planeswalker decks in Super Friends decks.
I didn't think of this because I was like, all right, 1/1 counters. There's a lot of ways to add a lot of 1/1 counters.
Yeah, like Heroic Intervention. We've heard of this.
And those are mostly in green and white, and this is in blue. So, like, I was like, yeah, it's fine. If you meet the criteria, and you'll know because you'll be like, am I putting counters on all my stuff? Okay, fine. I can play. And am I in blue? But I didn't think about Super Friends.
Yeah, it says permanents. Any number of permanents you control.
That feels really good.
If you have 3 planeswalkers and you're like one of your opponents finally finds an attack and is like, all right, I'm going to send 2 creatures, one at this, one at that, one at this, and you phase them out.
It's the worst. They wasted their whole attack. They hit nothing. You don't take any damage, and your stuff got more loyalty counters and is definitely going to live till the next turn. Yeah, it's really good.
It protects against Cyclonic Rift, which is pretty wild.
Yep.
Because it phases them out. Like, there's no way to protect planeswalkers other than, I guess, the white one that phases out target permanents.
Yep.
Like, that's the only one I can think of.
Yeah, and Fogs will kind of do it, but only against attacks.
Right.
Won't work against Cyclonic Rifts and things like that, or destroy all non-land permanent type of things. Yeah, this is... When you said Planeswalkers, I was like, oh crap. This is a must include now in any Super Friends deck that has blue, I think.
Yeah.
Because you want the Proliferate already.
Yeah. The Proliferate is, like, if you played this as 2 mana, Proliferate is already super powerful.
Yeah, you might be fine just like, I don't even have to protect my stuff, but end step before my turn, I'm going to do this just to get the counters, and then and now it's my untap in my next turn, and I'm going to go off.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
So cool. Going to be really, really powerful in those decks. All right.
This is another big one that's getting a lot of buzz. It's like it's a movie that's been announced that is getting a lot of buzz. Everyone in town's talking about it.
I was going to say Oscar buzz, but I couldn't think of like they're going to win a Commandy.
A Commandy.
We're going to do the Commandy Awards at the end of the year.
Let's not talk about it. I hate award shows. Okay. It's called Roaming Throne. It is 4 mana for an artifact creature golem. It's a 4/4. It has Ward 2. As Roaming Throne enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Roaming Throne is the chosen type in addition to its other types. If a triggered ability of another creature you control of the chosen type triggers, it triggers an additional time.
Oh, another doubler.
Yeah.
We're still doubling.
We're still doubling. We're still... Listen, Roaming Triple Throne is coming. So triggered abilities are things that say when, whenever, and at.
Yes.
So at the beginning of your end step, that's a triggered ability. Whenever you attack, that's a triggered ability.
When it enters the battlefield.
That's a triggered ability. So it's Panharmonicon-y. That's just the card that comes to mind the most for me when we're doubling some kind of trigger. But this is just in its application specific to is the thing that's triggering the creature type that I've chosen.
Right. So this is super interesting. The first question is like, of course, this is going in creature type decks. This is going in like the new...
Is it?
I mean, that's the question is like, you look at it and you're like, well, I have a Merfolk deck. It's got to go in my Merfolk deck. And then you flip through your Merfolk deck and you're like, how many triggered abilities do I actually
How many triggered abilities are in this deck? Yeah.
In my Merfolk deck. And do I want a 4 mana artifact gumming up the works?
So Rachel did a lot of research.
I did.
A lot of math. Yep. To go through the popular different creature types and sort of look at the numbers, the percentages of them that have triggered abilities. All right. So you want to start with Dragon?
Yeah, I looked on EDH Rec. All of this data comes from EDH Rec, and I went to the Dragon Typal page and counted all. I guess that's the first one. I counted the top 20 dragons in dragon decks that have triggered abilities. So I looked at the top 20 dragons that show up and was like, this one does, this one doesn't. And 75% of the top 20 dragons in dragon decks have triggered abilities.
You counted those by hand?
Yeah, 1, 2.
Then how did
3,
we get
4.
the number for all dragons have triggered abilities?
I went to Scryfall.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So this number is a little bit murkier because I went to Scryfall, I searched type dragon, and I searched for when, whenever, and at.
Yeah.
And got the number of cards that showed up versus the number of dragon
interesting.
cards.
But at is like a word that could be in a sentence in some other place or something?
It's like I searched at the beginning, I think, is how I phrased it, because that's normally how they write at triggers. So it's a little bit weirder, and it also includes triggered abilities that, if they are doubled, aren't necessarily doing anything. Like whenever a dragon attacks, it gains double strike.
Right.
Like
we're not assessing the usefulness of the trigger.
Right.
Yeah.
So this says 72% of all dragons in Magic have some sort of triggered ability.
So those two numbers are pretty close.
Pretty close. And sort of back each other up to show that, like, most dragons have triggered abilities.
Makes sense, because they tend to design, they're high mana cost cards, and they tend to design that way now, where it's like, hey, listen, you're going to pay 6 or 7 mana. We'll give you something right away.
You get an attack trigger, damage trigger, ETB, something like that. And then the next thing I did is I went to the top 10 dedicated dragon commanders and said, how many of these have triggered abilities? And of the top 10, 50% of them have triggered abilities.
Okay, so less than the average amount of dragons have.
Right. These are also, I counted only the dragons that have triggered abilities.
Right.
Because sometimes they're like, this is my human, but it has dragon deck or something.
Gotcha.
So...
Okay, so an interesting thing is when breaking down these numbers, we'd posited the theory that we thought elves would have less triggered abilities than other creature types, because elves tend to tap and have activated abilities. And it's interesting because we were right about that.
We
and
were
I felt
so
good about it.
smart.
Yeah. So 50% of all elves have triggered abilities. Only 50%. 55% of the top 20 elves have triggered abilities. And 60% of the top 10 elf commanders have triggered abilities. So it does sort of steadily go up, but it is still low on the low side when compared to dragons.
Right.
Yeah. So that's interesting.
The other thing is, like, elves tend to be a more nimble creature type. They're, like, cheaper and want to have a lot of them. So it feels like having this 4 mana one in there just that only works for half your elves doesn't do a whole lot.
Yeah, I think that is the outcome of seeing these numbers, is you don't want Roaming Throne in an elf deck.
Yeah.
What about zombies, though?
Zombies, 53% of all zombies have triggered abilities.
Low.
60% of the top 20 of the top 20 zombies in zombie decks have triggered abilities. And 70% of the top 20 zombie commanders have triggered abilities.
Interesting. It goes in, like, I was like, oh, no, you don't. And then, if your commander has a triggered ability,
it makes this very good.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, like, commander design is really built around triggered abilities. So many commanders are like, when you do this, you get this.
That, yep.
So I think the fact that this percentage is higher in the commander slot makes a lot of sense. It does make me think that, like, if you have a zombie commander that has a triggered ability,
maybe you play Roaming Throne.
Then maybe you look at Roaming Throne.
Okay. The last two are vampire and human. Vampire is 65% of all vampires triggered abilities, 70% of the top 20 vampires in vampire decks, and 70% of the top 10 vampire commanders. So solid and actually pretty high.
Yeah.
Human is 52% of all humans, 60% of the top 20, and 90% of the human commanders, top 10 human commanders.
Yeah, that's 9 out of the 10.
That's crazy. That's the highest number we saw.
Or something.
So it feels to me like, just looking at that, and we didn't break down every single creature type, sorry, merfolk, sorry, pirates. Of this list, elf is a for sure no, zombies a maybe, and everything else seems like possible.
Maybe you look at it. It really depends on how your deck works. Like, if you're relying on sacrificing zombies to get dies triggers to replay them to get ETB triggers, then this card is great and does exactly what your zombie deck wants to do.
Yeah.
If you're trying to accrue a huge zombie army and just, like, attack with a ton of token zombies, then probably not.
Right. Interesting. I would say if your commander doesn't have a triggered ability, then we're back to the numbers we talked about, was somewhere in the realm of like 20 to 25 cards in of that creature type have to have a triggered ability for you to consider this. But if your commander does it, maybe you only need 5 to 10 other cards in your deck to have a triggered ability to make this worth it. Again, in the right creature type. And in fact, depending on the commander, it could be that your commander's really the only card with that creature type but still Roaming Throne is worth playing because the triggered abilities are so key to your strategy, and doubling them is so worth it.
Yeah, I mean, that was what I was looking at. I went straight to the top 100 commanders on EDH Rec and was like, okay, which of these should look at Roaming Throne just based on their own powerful triggered abilities? And a couple that come up early, I think, are fairly obvious. Like Yuriko, this seems wild because it doubles all of your ninja triggers.
It doubles
and it doubles Yuriko's.
Show the top. Yeah.
So, and that's based on a lot based on combat damage, and there's a lot there. But if you're just looking at pure powerful triggered abilities, it's like, does this go in a Kaalia deck? It doubles Kaalia's attack trigger.
Yeah, I mean, if you untap with Kaalia and then play this,
that's a problem. Somebody's taking a lot of damage right now.
Yeah, is that worth it?
It's hard to say. Do you run Ishin in Kaalia that doubles your attack triggers?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't think you do.
Probably not. It's already tough to have something in play.
Yeah.
So we were like, okay, which ones are the most impactful triggers to double? What are the commanders that we are slamming this into?
Yeah, as you look at the top, commanders on EDH Rec and decide sort of would I play Roaming Throne in that? I was trying to decipher why my answer would be yes or no. Mm-hmm. And I think the specifics of the trigger sort of mattered. I was much more likely to think it was good if the play pattern suggested that I could play this Roaming Throne the turn after or after my commander was out, and my commander could then do the thing immediately. So it felt good in Magda, where it was like, okay, play Roaming Throne, name dwarves, attack with my dwarves, get the extra treasure, I've gotten it. And I don't need to play this and wait. Keenan, I thought, was pretty good because it's play this, now my stuff, that my mana dorks and stuff, tap for, and probably just make Roaming Throne free, right? The 4 mana I paid for it returns that mana with the extra mana it gives me off of Keenan's triggered ability. Finn the Fanbearer was another one, which was
a sweet option.
Yeah, whenever a creature you control with Death Touch deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. So you
triggers individually, so they get 4 per creature that hit.
Yeah, so if you have 2, but even if you just have Finn, you're like, boom, play this, you get 4 poison counters right now. And those all felt like good situations, as opposed to ones where I didn't like it, which were things where I was like, hey, I was going to have to play this after my commander's out and then do something else to really get the value. So Light Pause was one where it felt kind of bad because, okay, I got to play this, name Fox or Advisor, and then get an Aura into play. And that felt like that extra hurdle made it a lot worse. Tulane was another one where it's like, okay, I'm going to name, I believe Tulane's a human or druid, and then I got to cast a creature to get the double. And I didn't want to, that felt like that's not really likely. That's not right. Then I'm in the Ojer talk situation where I'm like, play this thing, does nothing, hope I untap.
Yeah, and in both of those decks, you just sort of want another cheap creature. You just want another cheap Aura. You can keep moving faster.
I'd rather just cast a creature with Tulane.
Just cast another one. Yeah.
Just
you get all the value. I mean, obviously you get the value from casting this because Tulane gives you that value.
That's true.
But you'd rather cast a 2-mana one so you can cast another 1-mana one.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to have an ETB. I cast a cheap creature with an ETB, get the extra draw. Yeah.
The other section that you mentioned that you started saying yes was when triggered abilities showed up multiple times on a card.
Yeah, so we have cards now, commanders that have 2 triggered abilities on them. 2 different ones.
Starting with Prosper Tomebound at the beginning of your end step, exile a card. Whenever you play a card from exile, create a treasure token. So now you're exiling 2 cards at end of turn, and you're making 2 treasures for every one you cast.
Yeah.
That seems good.
Yeah, because I double the value of the doubling, right? So that seems sweet. I thought Marin of Clan Nel Toth was a really good one, right? I play it, and then I have something that sacks itself. I have a Sakura Tribe Elder, and I go, cool, name Shaman, name Human, whatever. I sack my Sakura Tribe Elder. I put 2 counters on Marin, and now I get 2 creatures out of my graveyard. Now, that scenario's really, really pie in the sky because I don't have to have 2 creatures in there. But, just the ability to get double means that Roaming Throne, when you get it on turn 6, 7, 8 represents more value than it will in Tulane or something. So yeah, I really I think Roaming Throne is going to get played a lot based on this conversation, which is like, okay, well, creature type matters deck. Yes, going to play it in a bunch of those. Wait, and just a bunch of individual commanders also will play this.
Very popular. Yeah. I wanted to mention backgrounds because there are backgrounds that give your commander triggered abilities. So you could, even if your commander already only has one triggered ability, if you run a bunch of backgrounds or if you have a background in the command zone, then you start stacking them. Like the Passionate Archaeologist is one we mention all the time, but it says whenever you cast a spell from exile, this creature deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to target opponent. So now this becomes a damage doubler in addition to whatever commander triggered abilities it naturally has. Or like Guild Artisan, it says if you attack a player that has the most life total, you make 2 treasures. Now you're making 4. And like
that just paid for the Roaming Throne,
Now you have all your mana back. So if you are running a ton of backgrounds or you're really like suiting up one commander with equipments, which often add triggered abilities to commanders, like all of the sort of this and that's are triggered abilities. Those are doubled. There's a lot of places where this chair starts showing up. We got a real Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I do think people are going to play it in a lot of situations where I don't think it's going to, like, not that it'll never work out for you, but I don't think it's going to be optimal or as good. And I like to think of cards as like, are they setups or are they payoffs? And this is a setup card. It pays you off for what you're going to do subsequently after it's out. And if your commander fits that bill too much, I think you generally don't want to set up and then set up again, especially big, scary commanders that are often very powerful. Joda, the Unifier, is one where, like, yeah, you could play this, name human, and then whenever you cast a legendary spell, really go off.
Cascade twice.
But Joda's already, like, you do that, and it's already so impactful and so powerful that you don't want to. First of all, you don't want to play this before you play Joda because they're already hyper-focused on Joda. And now, if you play Roaming Throne and say human and Joda's not out, they're like, you're playing Joda next turn. We're all holding up our removal spell because we cannot allow that to happen twice. But then if you go Joda and then play this, why did you do that? You need to cast a legendary spell.
You trigger Joda. Go. Yeah, you have Joda.
You untapped with Joda with enough, you have 4 mana. You should be casting a legendary thing and getting the payoff for having Joda out. You don't set up again. That's like doubling down on your bet, and that's how you lose all your money. Trust me, because I've been to Vegas. Yeah, we were talking about Miriam, and we have a little bit of a disagreement here because I think it's similar to Joda, where I think Miriam is so powerful, and generally one trigger with Miriam is enough to set you up for the win. Like I've beaten a Miriam deck like twice in my whole life.
It's so powerful. Yeah. It's wild.
Even though you know it's powerful, and you're like, I'm just going to kill it when it comes out.
I'm ready.
And you do that.
I'm mulligan to swords.
Yeah, exactly. And
then 3 mana for the swords.
Yeah. And then they cast it again, and you're like, okay. By the 3rd time it sticks, and they still win. And you're like, all I did was care about that card, and I still lost to it. So to me, the Roaming Throne is not needed and is just yes, it's a force multiplier, but for a thing that you don't need. You should just be casting the dragon. That's the scary thing that's going to kill you rather than another setup piece. But to be fair, your Roaming Throne technically will be a dragon and will get doubled by Miriam, so which means that you will
have 3?
Yeah. Get 2 extra plus the extra the next time you cast a dragon. But that just feels like...
And also your deck is full of dragons.
Yeah. It just
so
feels
the next dragon you cast...
Yeah.
It's definitely a win more card in Miriam, but because the deck is already so dragon focused, it's a second copy of Miriam.
It will be very
that
cool.
Can also make a ton of copies.
Sure.
It means that you're just like, even if you cast this early and they're like, okay, Miriam's coming. We're ready for Miriam. Then like you still have the issue of the ward where if they answer Miriam, you cast Miriam again.
Why does Miriam have ward?
It's so ridiculous.
Yeah. This card needs protection.
It's already so busted.
I guess if you ever stuck it and you made 2 of it, and then the next dragon? If they don't have a board wipe, they're like, well, I guess we kill Miriam. And you're like, cool, but I have 2 Roaming Thrones that say dragon, so I'll just cast a dragon and get whatever that ETB
Old
is.
Gnawbone now makes 4 zillion treasures.
Yeah.
It just does what the deck is already doing, and it becomes a force multiplier for Miriam, which is, she doesn't necessarily need, but if we're playing dragons, we're going over the top anyway.
I guess so. I don't like to draw that much attention to myself. I feel like if I cast it
either. This is
before
my
it's
nightmare.
Coming out,
This is my nightmare, is playing Miriam and everyone being like, we must kill you.
All right. The next card is...
but is very exciting. And your favorite card in the episode.
Wow, good tease.
But first...
We'll be right back.
Yeah, it's me, Cranko. You Magic players are always going,
Oh, Cranko, make me a bunch of goblins.
well, that's easy for you to say, but guess what? Those goblin tokens don't come out of nowhere. I used to spend hours looking through job websites to hire new gobos, but not no more. Now I've got Indeed, where you can attract, interview, and hire in the same place. Their powerful tools let me find new recruits faster than your opponents can say, okay, I scoop. Indeed's hiring platform does the hard work for you, matching you with quality candidates instantaneously. That means quick, numbskulls. Plus, with Indeed, I ain't gotta pay for resumes unless they're up to snuff. And I got high requirements, like being a goblin. So go ahead and tap me again, you goon. I got employees for days, thanks to Indeed.
Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/CommandZone. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/CommandZone. Just go to Indeed.com/CommandZone and support the show by saying you heard about it on this podcast. Indeed.com/CommandZone. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, my new deck list is complete. Now, let's see which cards I don't already own and buy them.
Wait, how'd you do that without going through a million boxes?
Oh, I just use ARCHIDEKT. They make it super easy to upload and manage your collection. Then, when you're done brewing a deck, you can sort it by collection status to see what you already have.
So this group is just cards you don't own.
Yep, I just click buy this stack, and it takes me right to Card Kingdom.
Whoa.
ARCHIDEKT is the best place to browse, brew, and playtest commander decks. Just go to archidekt.com/CommandZone to get started.
That's ARCHIDEKT.com/CommandZone.
Welcome back, everybody. We are talking about cards in the 99 for Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and this one is awesome. I love it so much.
Yeah, this is a really cool card. It's simple, which is maybe one of the reasons I like it.
Miracle.
It's Squirming Emergence, 1 green and black, 3 mana for sorcery. It says, return to the battlefield target non-land permanent card in your graveyard with mana value less than or equal to the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. So if you have 10 permanents, that's lands, creatures, artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers, battles, in any mix and match, then you can get a 10-drop back for 3 mana. Onto the battlefield.
He's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, we know the 10 drops is like Ugin can be reanimated, or Bolus the Citadel, or Omniscience.
Cheating Omniscience from my graveyard directly onto the battlefield for 3 mana seems like pretty good. Pretty good.
I mean, it's so powerful. Obviously, it wants to be in a deck that is milling itself naturally.
Has to be.
And isn't just a creature deck.
Yeah. I think you need a high level of permanence, but it doesn't have to be insane. You're going to have, let's say you have 35 to 38 lands. If another 25 to 30 of your cards are permanents, and you are self-milling. If you're not self-milling, I don't think this card is probably playable, but there are a lot of decks that are playing with the graveyard and want to mill, in which case this card becomes pretty insane as long as you have enough good hits. And by good hits, I just mean stuff that is 7 mana plus that will sit in your graveyard, that doesn't shuffle itself back in. Yeah, that because, I mean, think of the Omniscience thing. If you Hermit Druid on 2, you could get Omniscience and Blade turn 3 with this as long as it starts in your opening hand or you draw it. Yeah.
The thing I want to mention with this card is because it's so powerful, and we've mentioned some big non-creature permanents. The reason we're focusing on non-creature permanents is because there are ways to get creatures back on the battlefield.
We've had
There's Reanimate, Animate Dead. These are 1 mana, 2 mana spells.
People play them a ton for a reason.
Yeah, like I have a Sidisi deck which has 56 creatures in it. It self-mills. It's nuts. Like this would reanimate any one of them.
Yep.
But I just run reanimate spells because it's all creatures. But if you're in a deck that is incidentally fueling its graveyard and happens to have big, impactful non-creature permanents, that's where your deck, like this card, is really going to shine.
Yeah. I would even go so far as to say that it's worth putting in an Ugin in Omniscience. Some things that, like 1 or 2 of that caliber into your Sidisi deck if you're going to put Squirming Emergence in.
Yeah.
Because the upside of that play pattern is so great, and the downside is small because you're just putting stuff in the bin. So listen, if the Omniscience hits the graveyard, especially if it's looting or rummaging in some way, you just don't worry about it. It's just another card that went to your graveyard that didn't cost you anything over the course of the game and just gave you a chance to get it out for a very cheap price at some point. Especially if you're in blue and you can get things like an Archaeomancer or something that can bring the Squirming Emergence back. Just the ability to just have that flexibility, and every once in a while I just do a crazy thing. And yeah, maybe the reason I like this card is it's so simply powerful. What it does is reduce the mana cost of a thing. And just taking a 10 mana thing and saying you got it for 3 is inherently broken. But it's not combo broken.
Yeah.
It's fair broken.
And that's Commander.
Yeah.
Fair broken. This card is so much fun. The first thing I thought of was Archaeomancer. It was like, if you're milling, you probably have Archaeomancer in the deck.
Yep.
I'm so excited to put it in my Lord Windgrace deck, which is a Super Friends deck. So it's Jund Super Friends.
Get your Planeswalker back.
You can get a Planeswalker back. And I don't even intend to like there's Ugin in the deck, but I'm not trying to like entomb Ugin, reanimate Ugin. It's just like, I'll get back 5 mana Nissa or something like that.
But you could do the entomb Ugin.
You could?
Cheat Ugin into play thing.
You could.
And one of the problems with Planeswalker decks is you want that extra mana left over on the side to protect your Planeswalkers, and this allows you to sort of do that. Like, I got an Ugin into my graveyard, I got it out, and I have 4 mana sitting there. And everyone's screwed because now I can hold up my, what's that blue card we just talked about?
The Ripples of Potential.
Yeah, I can hold that up with, I just cast my Ugin, I activated it, and I'm holding up Ripples of Potential, and I feel unbeatable.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real position. So fun. I think I'm going to play a lot of that card, even though it's Golgari.
Yeah, that's the downside of it. But, the good thing is self-mill decks often include Golgari. And it's like usually with blue. It's usually Sultai. But, yeah, that's the one thing I'll say. The type of decks that want it will often be in that color.
Yeah.
Or those colors.
Okay, this next one is a double-face card. It's Tarrian's Journal. 1 and a black for a legendary artifact. It has an activated ability that says tap, sack another artifact or creature, draw a card, activate only as a sorcery. It has a second ability that's 2 tap, discard your hand, transform Tarrian's Journal. Uh-oh. The backside better be good. It is. It's the Tomb of Aclazotz. Tap, add black. Tap, you may cast a creature spell from your graveyard this turn. If you do, it enters the battlefield with a finality counter on it, and it's a vampire in addition to its other types.
Finality counters are a new thing where if it leaves the battlefield, you exile it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the tomb, basically, you've discarded your hand. So it's like, but we'll give you a consolation prize that you can, pick one thing in your graveyard and play that every turn.
Which, it's you cast a creature. Yeah. I mean, you get to, it's like a land that gives you a Muldrotha, kind of, for creatures.
Yeah. I don't think the backside of this is why we like it.
Yeah, that's the funny thing is, you look at it and you're like, this is very good, but getting there is tough. The thing I like best about it is you can just sack food tokens and draw a card. It's 2 mana. It sacks something that you don't care about and gives you a new card back. It feels sort of like Idol of Oblivion.
Yeah, just expendable stuff you've got lying around, or stuff gets removed, right? Like they go to remove your thing, it's gonna die. You're just like, cool, I'll get a card out of it.
It's only sorcery speed.
Oh, dang it!
I know it does make it much worse. Yeah,
I didn't see the sorcery thing.
The sorcery speed makes it significantly worse. You have to be throwing out stuff that you don't want.
You have to proactively sack it.
You do want scrap.
Okay. I think it's still good. It's definitely not as good. The big thing I was going to say about this is that it's a 2 mana thing that you put out. So the opportunity cost of getting it out on the battlefield and starting to use it is very low. But yeah, sorcery.
Yeah, as a sorcery makes it a lot trickier to use. Tricky. It's more of just a value engine that you have to activate, and you're getting rid of tokens most of the time. Or you're threatening your opponent's stuff and sacking that.
Yeah, or it's in a deck where you want stuff to die.
Yeah,
you're getting dies triggers, Yeah, it kind of fits the vampiric rights type of shell. But the backside, it's like something's gone wrong if you've gotten there because you probably got down to 0 cards in hand and figured or 1 and figured well, I already don't have any, so...
This is an ejector lever for sure, where you're like, I need something. Here we go. Play the land I just drew. Activate this. Now we're going to cast... Hopefully I have an artifact or a creature in there.
That draws me some cards.
I think this card is a great little value piece. It's cheaper than a lot of the other things that we have that do this. I want Dockside Chef is a black, and it costs 1 and a black to sack an artifact or creature, draw a card. And I kept trying to play this card, and it's just too expensive. You can't pay 2 mana to draw a card repeatedly.
Even Vampiric Rights cost mana and is often too expensive, can be done at sorcery speed. The fact that this is just tap, do it, is a big deal, Yeah,
2 mana for a card, 2 mana for 2 cards, 2 mana for 3 cards. I can do it.
Yep. I can do that, man.
I can do it. I can count to 3. This card's neat. I'm excited to try it.
All right, this next one is the Everflowing Well. It is 2 and a blue for a legendary artifact. It says when the Everflowing Well enters the battlefield, mill 2 cards, then draw 2 cards. It has Descend 8. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, transform the Everflowing Well, and it transforms into the Myriad Pools, which you can tap for a blue, and it says whenever you cast a permanent spell using mana produced by the Myriad Pools, up to one other target permanent you control becomes a copy of that spell until end of turn.
Okay.
Okay. So
I like this card because it's simple.
Yeah. At the end, I was like, wait, what? Yes. My brain had to reread it as I was reading it and go, yeah, I got that. So the front side is simple, though. It's divination plus mill 2.
Mm-hmm. On a permanent, on an artifact.
Yeah, you could sack this artifact to the Tarrian's Journal.
And draw another card.
Dang.
I really like that. If this just did that, I would probably play that card. Like a 3-mana artifact that ETBs mill 2, draw 2. While it's not like super wild, it just has a lot of things that it's really, really good with. Yeah. It's great like in Galazeth where I can tap it for mana. It's great with Goblin Welder where I can sack it, get something back, and then bring it back, draw more cards. You can blink it.
Right.
And it just naturally fits into a lot of like permanent-based artifact blue mill decks.
Yeah, the self-mill, we've been talking on this episode, and a bunch of the cards were like, you can only play this if you're doing self-mill things, and a lot of decks do that. So the mill 2 is actually additional value, right? It's not just draw 2. The mill 2 matters, because you'll often have access to those cards later.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do like the front end a lot. And so that means, are you sort of thinking of the land side as just kind of gravy?
I think the land side's just gravy. I think if you get 8 permanents in your graveyard, and this turns into a land, now you've paid 3 mana to mill 2, draw 2, and ramp a land in blue.
Yeah.
That's a very impressive rate, and it just does a lot of things that we're really happy to do in Commander. And getting 8 permanents in your graveyard in a self-mill deck is nothing.
Yeah, honestly, if you rephrase this card and you said, 2 and a blue for an artifact, when it enters, draw 2, mill 2. And then if you have Descend 8, sacrifice this, find an island from your library and put it into play, tapped. I think that card would be pretty good. Is it tapped or untapped? It's untapped, huh?
I think it's untapped, yeah.
Oh, even better.
Yeah.
I think that card would be pretty good.
Yeah.
Draw me the cards, mill me the cards, leave a rectangle around that I can manipulate in other ways, maybe sack it or whatever, or I ramp with it, which are all good. So let's talk about the Myriad Pools, though, because it has this weird ability. And I read that ability, and I was like, well, how do I use that? Because you're transforming one of your permanents into a permanent spell that you're casting.
Right.
So
anything.
But it's hard to take advantage of that because let's say I cast Mole Drifter. I turn a permanent I control into a Mole Drifter. I don't draw cards. It didn't enter the battlefield.
Right. It's just now it's a 2/2 flyer.
So it kind of gives haste?
Yeah. It's good with like static abilities, I think. Like you're doubling the first thing I thought of is just like an Ethereum Sculptor that says artifacts you control cost 1 less to cast.
Okay.
If you cast an Ethereum Sculptor with this, you turn a clue into an Ethereum Sculptor. Now all of your artifacts cost 2 less to cast.
Sure.
And you didn't pay anything for that value.
Just for that turn, though.
Just for that turn.
Back.
But it gives you a big turn and incidental value for that
you
kind
also
of thing.
cast Scrap Trawler.
Yes. Yeah.
Then they lose. Yeah.
That's it. I mean,
they do because
just having 2 scrap trawlers is like pretty wild.
That's actually
right.
Better.
Like those kind of static abilities, like or triggered abilities, are great to have 2 of.
That's true.
And you don't have to be like 2 tap, add a blue to make this happen. It's just like, you know what? This time I'm gonna have an extra Archmage Emeritus.
Yeah, that's true. Because then you sort of turn that into the thing, and then you get double triggers.
Yeah.
You have to do another thing after that, but hopefully whatever you're doing is kind of small.
Yeah, you probably just turn like a land into it. Is it any permanent?
Yeah, target permanent you control.
Yeah, you just turn a land into a like.
I was trying to think of big things you could do, and I was like, Hole Breaker Horror. But if you do that, how do you have mana left?
Yeah.
To take maybe you could cast like an Opt. And then you're
sure.
like, cool.
I bounced two things.
That was worth it.
Aha.
Blightsteel actually felt pretty good because it's like, now I turn one of my lands into Blightsteel, but it can attack now.
Yeah.
And the one saving grace about Blightsteel, having played against it a lot in my years, is that it doesn't have haste.
And here it comes.
Yeah. Because oftentimes, if you don't see it coming, you're dead.
Yeah. I mean, you're not often like just tapping out, casting Blightsteel with your mana.
Point, yeah.
But that kind of thing, giving a threat haste is a big deal.
You know what?
Giving like the ancient blue dragon that hits and draws cards.
Once you flip this over, you probably set up for a High Tide or a Mana Geyser turn. And then you're a setup play that's at the beginning of a turn where I've got 25 mana. And then Ethereum Sculptor, even Hullbreaker Horror type stuff comes into play more. So maybe I'm just, again, thinking about it wrong, where I'm like, well, how would I take advantage of every turn? You're not. It's a land. It's an island. But then it does help you win the game on the turn when you try and win it.
Yeah. I mean, I think you look at your turn and you're like, what of the things in my hand do I want two of? And it's like, I guess I'll cast this talisman with it and I'll turn this creature into a talisman until
just to get one extra mana this turn.
Just to like have an extra mana. Yeah. Okay. It's interesting. I like it a lot. It's not fancy.
I mean, there's a lot of words.
There's a lot of words. It's pretty. Everything in this set is fancy, including this.
Because so many cards are 2 cards, but this next card is just 1 card, but it's still got a lot of words on it.
The Millennium Calendar. A single mana for a legendary artifact. Whenever you untap one or more permanents during your untap step, put that many time counters on the Millennium Calendar. Okay, you untap 4 lands, you put 4 counters on it. 2 tap double the number of time counters on the Millennium Calendar. Okay. When there are 1,000 or more time counters on the Millennium Calendar, sacrifice it and each opponent loses 1,000 life.
I like how it's not like you win the game.
No. Now, if you have Aclazotz on the battle, the Bloodletter of Aclazotz, now they lose 2,000 life, Josh. That's a combo.
That's what we call a combo.
Okay, this is a wild win con on a 1 mana artifact. It's like the artifact you were talking about before, where it's like, I haven't done it many times, but when I do get to do it, Azor's Gateway, it's awesome.
Yeah. Yep.
Right?
Yep. So I think you would think that this would go in like counter manipulation.
Yeah, like in the Doctor Who like time travel ones. You're like, it has time counters on it. I'll timey-wimey and put 3 additional counters on it.
Yeah, I don't think it does nothing for this card, because the numbers you're talking about eventually get so big that like the difference between 100 and 11 and 121 counters on it is not. It doesn't actually change any math.
Right.
So to me, it goes in untappy decks because you have to be able to use the activated ability to double on it. And then, so there's some important numbers to know. And I did the math.
You did some math here.
Yeah, and it's interesting because once I started doing it, I was like, oh, I get the math here. But as I was starting, I was like, oh, geez. So if it has 4 counters on it, like you've played this, and on played on turn 1, and I think by turn 3 it should have you get the 1, you get the 2, then on. Okay, so let's say.
But you are incidentally adding stuff when you untap permanents.
That's what I mean.
Well.
The lands.
So these are a little rough.
Okay, so 4 counters on it, you'd have to activate 9 times to get to 1,000 plus.
That's a lot. 9 times is many.
Yep. If it's got 5 counters on it, you're up to 8. You go down to 8 times. That's the same for 6 and 7 counters. You'd have to activate 8 times. So there's functionally no different if you start doubling at 5, 6, or 7. At 4, it's an additional time. So you probably don't even bother spending the mana there. Once you're at 8 counters on it, it's 7 activations away from winning you the game. I'm going to call it winning you the game. Dealing 1,000 damage to each of your opponents.
Losing 1,000 life.
Yeah, maybe they live. At 16 counters, it's 6 activations. At 32 counters, it's 5. At 63 plus, I just started saying plus here. Yeah. Maybe you got 68. It's 4 times. Yep. At 125 counters, it's 3 times away. And this is where you should start getting worried, I think. Like, if they're at 8 counters on it, whatever, it's going to be a little while.
Yeah.
They're going to skip ahead somewhere in here if they've got this in their deck. It's going to be like, oh, I'm 4 activations away. And then they're going to be like, play Voltaic, play Clock of Omens, play this, untap it 5 times, you all lose, ha ha ha.
Yeah.
That's how it's going to go. So anyway, 125 counters is 3 activations, 250 counters plus is 2 times, and obviously if it has 500 counters or more,
just one
away. So those are the numbers to worry about, but I would mostly think of like, is it 63 or more? That's in my brain. That's right. Where I'm like, I'm worried.
4 activations away, because it's reasonable to consider that they can untap it 3 times. Like that is a thing you can do.
It'll cost 8 mana.
Yep.
And that's in the realm of when that type of thing happens in Commander games, just like we were talking about.
And it's exponential, so you do have to like sort of keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
But I like that point that you don't even start doubling it really until it gets to around like 10. Yeah. Like you play this as early as you can. You just get the counters from untapping stuff incidentally, and then you start dumping mana into it once it has like a reasonable, like, what did we say? Like 12, like eight counters on
I'd
it?
say 8, yeah, either 8 or 16.
Is when you start actually doubling the number of counters on it. Obviously, if you have something like a doubling season, that changes the clock because now you're putting twice as many counters on every single time you activate it.
Those are going to be alarm bells going off like crazy for your opponents. So you would only play doubling season basically on that volcanic key turn anyway. That would all be in the calculus. So if you're playing it, like you're the one activating it, then somewhere around when it has 63 or more is when you've got your plan ready to be like, next turn I'm going to do A, B, and C all at once and then try and get there. Because you're not going to get there if you're like, so next turn I'm going to do it, and then I'm going to wait till my next turn, and then that turn I'm going to double it, and then I'm going to wait till my next turn, and that turn I'm going to double it, and I'll be at 500 plus, and then I'm going to wait till my next. You'll never get there.
Yeah. That's it's very slow, and your opponents will be like, okay, now we kill him.
Yeah. They're going to be like doing everything possible to either kill you or find a destroy target artifact spell. And between the three of them, they'll be able to do it.
There are a couple of things that really do speed up this clock, like a doubling season. We talked about, you mentioned Clock of Omens already. That's tap 2 untapped artifacts you control, untap target artifact. So if they have like treasures and stuff, you can start tapping treasures to untap this, to activate it multiple times. Unwinding Clock untaps all of your artifacts, so you can start doing it every turn. And you can activate this at instant speed, so keep an eye out. The one I wanted to mention was All Will Be One.
Well, this is actually the best win con if you're playing this card.
Yeah, I mean, 1,000 life, Schmausen life, they have 40, you know, like...
You don't need to get 1,000, you need to get 120.
All Will Be One is an enchantment for 5 minutes. Says whenever you put one or more counters on a permanent or player, All Will Be One deals that much damage to target opponent, creature and opponent controls, or planeswalker and opponent controls. So once you get like 10 counters on this thing, which is not that hard, now you're doing 10 damage to you, 20 damage to you, 40 damage to you, and the game's over.
Well, the great thing about All We One is it does it to any target, and it'll do it as even the small bits are going on as you're untapping your land. So you're just like, I untap for the turn. That was 8 counters going on this thing. I will deal 8 and kill that creature. And it's just like free removal. Yeah. To the point where like if you have All Will Be One in a deck and maybe a way to tutor for, you know,
Urza Saga or something. Urza Saga puts the calendar onto the battlefield.
Yeah, but it might be worth running a little package that's just like, I hope, I'm not going to try and win with the Millennium Calendar. I'm just going to try and pair it with All Will Be One, because that seems broken. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah.
I also wanted to mention that all of the things we're afraid of with this thing, like Unwinding Clock and Clock of Omens, are clocks that speed up the Millennium Calendar.
Wow, the flavor.
Timey-wimey. Yeah. It's a super sweet card. If you pull it off, we want to hear about it. That's really fun.
It's going to cause a lot of math arguments. No, it was at 74. That means it's at 128.
Somebody get a calculator. Somebody
what was that? What was that before? I don't remember. Ah, crap.
Just need a life count.
Yeah, we're not going to play that on game nights because we're definitely going to be like, rewind the tape. What was it at?
Jamie, did you write that down? I was writing down something else. All right, what is this? This is one of my favorite cards in the set. It's
very cool.
Tishana's Tidebinder, 2 and a blue for a Merfolk Wizard. It's a 3/2 with Flash. When it enters the battlefield, counter up to 1 target activated or triggered ability, like the lose 1,000 life.
Oh, that would be so bad.
No.
You're like, yes, 1,000, and they're like, I'll counter that ability. And not only that, but
if an ability of an artifact, creature, or planeswalker is countered this way, that permanent loses all abilities for as long as Tishana's Tidebinder remains on the battlefield.
Wow, we talked about the Millennium Calendar, and then we talked about the Silver Bullet to stop the Millennium Calendar.
So this card's sweet. It's a creature with a stifle effect on it. It can counter triggered abilities and activated abilities. And remember, whenever are triggered abilities, and colons represent activated abilities.
Yeah. But it has this added thing because we've seen the stifles and stuff before, but this one also is like, I'll stop that and then also stop that thing from doing anything else.
Yeah. While I'm here, you're quiet.
Yeah. It's the
teacher. You're going to sit by me.
Yeah. It's the quiet corner.
So there's a couple of strange things about this. This can counter any triggered or activated ability, but when it enters, it can only shut down all of the abilities of artifacts, creatures, and planeswalkers.
Oh, it can counter an ability of an enchantment, but it won't turn weird.
Yeah. So it won't shut down enchantments. It won't shut down like lands. Like if you counter a Maze of Ith, it won't shut down the Maze of Ith.
Why not?
I don't know. That's like a limitation they put on it, I guess.
Weird.
So it's artifact, creature, or planeswalkers are the only ones that lose all their abilities. And the other thing is, it doesn't just lose its triggered or activated, it just loses its abilities. So
Yeah,
if it
it's like-
has static abilities, it's like, no.
Yeah, which is pretty sweet
Yeah.
because obviously you're just like, planeswalkers especially, you catch their planeswalker ability and you're just like, that planeswalker is nothing. It just doesn't do stuff.
Yeah. I love it, specifically with planeswalkers that have like triggered abilities or static abilities. Whenever a creature you control dies, draw a card on like Liliana Dreadhorde General, you can stifle that and just no more of that.
Bye. Yeah, that's pretty sweet. Oh man, somebody's gonna work really hard to get up to their ultimate, and then not only not ultimate, but also not have that planeswalker be anything. That's pretty cool.
I love a Stifle Effect. It's a really fun gacha card, specifically around like big payoff cards like Aetherflux Reservoir.
Yeah.
Like, this was very cute. You had a wonderful time. Thank you for paying 50 life.
Yeah.
No.
No, that didn't happen. Yeah.
Also, you're gaining no more life.
I like to have a stifle or two in a deck just for, it's so unexpected. It's a gimme they're going to get the thing. So when they're calculating their turns and they're sequencing their plays, you know, you're often being like, well, what if they kill this creature, or who's got mana open? But you never say like, what if I activate this planeswalker ability and it just doesn't happen? And so that really can screw up, especially if it's late in the process where like I do A, I do B, and then C is going to be this, and you're like, oh, C doesn't happen, and the whole thing sucks now.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, you do have to catch the ability to turn off the thing. You can't just play this and say, okay, turn off your Avenger of Zendikar. There has to be an ability on the stack of some kind, triggered or activated.
Yeah, so you could counter all of the ETB, all the plants getting made, or you could counter a landfall trigger, all of the counters going on it. It's nice against stuff like Avenger of Zendikar, because a lot of the time you're like, oh, a counterspell just answers an Avenger of Zendikar. It's like a counterspell only answers it when it's on the stack.
Right.
This one says like, you have the plants, it's too late, I can't do anything about that, but they're not getting any bigger. Like, I'm going to counter your landfall ability and turn that off.
Yeah, if they cast Avenger of Zendikar and then the next turn you draw your counterspell, it doesn't help you.
Nope.
But Tishana's Tidebinder kind of does. That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like this card a lot just because it's going to be very unexpected.
And
go ahead.
it's worth noting that if they blink the permanent and the permanent comes back in, it's a new permanent. It is alive and well.
Yep.
You could blink your Tishana's Tidebinder, get him again, but it's a new permanent and is no longer shut down.
Yeah. Also, it doesn't catch replacement effects. So anything that says if, so like Academy Manufactor, it won't affect that card at all. It just doesn't see it. There's no triggered or activated ability on Academy Manufactor. That is a replacement effect.
Right.
So the word if is what you're looking for. If it says if, sorry.
And it also doesn't work on mana abilities because they don't use the stack. So, of course, you can't like stifle a Soul Ring or something like that. But this is particularly relevant for Phyrexian Altar and Ashnod's Altar because those are mana abilities.
Which seems like not fair, but they are.
But they are.
Yeah, so the question here is narrowness because this is pretty specific. Although the fact that it's triggered and activated, and we just went through and saw that like a very high percentage of cards just have triggered abilities. You add activated into that, it's going to be even more. Is this a broad enough type of effect that you would play it widely? Or is there a specific type of deck you think this goes in?
I mean, I think that's the issue with stifle effects that we've seen in the past is like if you stifle something, it's still a problem. Yeah. It's not a problem right now, but it's still likely a problem. And the fact that it sort of answers, you know, a commander like a Kenrith or something like that, and it says like you are done. Like you
got to kill this.
Yeah,
you got to do something.
Yeah, without necessarily sending it back to the command zone, or like obviously they can activate it on the stack if they have infinite mana. They have infinite mana, but it does give you an option, and I like that it's on a creature, so you can blink it and you can reanimate it, and it has merfolk synergies in it.
Yeah.
I think it's a ton of fun. I love having the answer to something weird and being like, ah ha ha, you think you thought, but you don't.
Yeah, that is my favorite.
Yeah, ton of fun. Okay. Lost Caverns of Ixalan actually came with a ton of answers. We've talked about a few of them already that are a little bit tougher to evaluate. And I didn't want to spend a ton of time with, but we would be remiss to not talk about a couple of removal spells that are in this set. So we're going to go through them pretty quick.
Yeah, it feels like the set, one of the things feels like we're purposefully doing is giving some nice, efficient removal and interaction to players. And some of the highest played cards in the format are Swords to Plowshares, Path of Exile, that kind of style of thing. And so some of those can be expensive. They sort of fluctuate in prices or how widely available they are. So I think it's cool that they're handing out some candy here. They're handing out some stuff that I think is going to be usable. Even the ones that were like, oh, this card's better or worse, these are still going to be very good and playable for players in decks because it's all efficient stuff.
Yeah. All right, we're going to start with Bitter Triumph. 1 and a black for an instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card or pay 3 life. It says destroy target creature or planeswalker.
So 2 mana, murk a creature or planeswalker, pay 3 life.
Most of the time, yeah.
Yep.
I think this replaces all my Infernal Grasps. I think this is like really efficient. It doesn't exile. That's the only knock on it.
Yeah. Are you willing to pay 1 more life for the ability to kill planeswalkers? Yes, I am.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely am.
Can do.
Yeah. I compared a little to Anguish Unmaking, which is a very good card and played in a lot of decks. Obviously, it doesn't hit as many permanent types, but
But
it's
also
2 mana instead of 3.
It's 2 mana.
Yep.
It doesn't have that second white pip as well. Flexible, strong,
highly
it's gonna show up
playable.
a lot.
Yep. The next one is Contest of Claws. It's 1 and a green for a sorcery. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to another target creature. If excess damage was dealt this way, discover X, where X is that excess damage. Now, discover is the new Cascade variant. It says exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card with mana value X or less, and then cast it without paying its mana cost, or put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So it's been fixed in a couple of places. You can put it into your hand, so if you hit a counterspell or something, you don't have to cast it. Yeah. So the excess damage thing is like, let's say I have a 7/7 and Rachel has a 4/4. I cast this. I have 3 excess. I kill the 4/4 and I have 3 excess damage. I will discover for 3, which means I flip cards from the top of my library until I find a spell that is 3 CMC or less, and then I either cast that or put it into my hand. I think people evaluate Discover and Cascade incorrectly in that the higher the number gets, there's
going to get a 10 drop.
Yeah, it has marginal benefit after 3, really, because you can get X or less. In some ways, 1 is better than 2 and 3 because you'll probably get your Soul Ring or your Skull Clamp.
Esper Sentinel.
Yeah.
It's 1 mana and you have it in the deck. It's powerful.
Very good. Yeah. So, whereas 2 drops are a lot more variance, you're likely to get a Mana Rock, which, at the time you're casting this, maybe not as impactful to the game. And that means if you cast, let's say I have a 20/20 and I hit her 4/4, I have a Discover 16, but what I'm likely to get is just the next spell in my deck, which could be a 2-drop. And, most decks are full of 2s and 3s. So your probably average get in your deck is like a 2.8 mana thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it doesn't necessarily have to go in a deck where you're like, I have an 18/18 in the command zone and I'm using it to cascade a huge amount. What I like about this is like, we don't play a ton of bite spells because it requires you have a creature and it requires like a lot of things to happen. But this gives you an additional, like it gives you a card back. Yeah. So this is a removal spell that cantrips as long as you have a big enough creature in play, which means for me, it's on the table.
Yeah, think about it. And it gets a lot better if you can manipulate the top of your library and see it in any way.
For sure, yeah.
Because if you can see like, oh, there's a 7-drop there and I'm going to really get paid here, that's a totally different equation.
Then it's awesome.
Yeah.
Sorcery speed, of course, makes it a little bit more narrow, but pretty cool card.
Okay.
This next one is Eaten by Piranhas. It's one of my favorite flavor cards in the whole deck set. It's 1 and a blue for an enchantment aura with flash. It has enchant creature. Enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a black skeleton creature with face power and toughness. 1/1.
You ain't got no more meat on your bones because the
You're
piranhas ate
skeleton
it.
now.
Yeah.
So this is a blue removal spell that gets around indestructible. It gets around like indestructible.
It loses all abilities too, so I think that's there's what's the word? Analogs to this card. Imprisoned in the Moon is one. Witness Protection, Frogify. The difference really between this and Witness Protection and Frogify is the flash, which is a big deal.
Yeah, when Witness Protection came out, I was like, this is single blue to like handle a creature, and it is handled. Like Pongify and Rapid Hybridization will normally do it, but they give them like sometimes a relevant body, and sometimes you want to exile it.
Yeah.
So I liked that this is another option for blue, but the flash, the sorcery speed is so brutal. So I think that Eaten by Piranhas maybe comes up on a deck that is more permanent focused. Maybe you're doing descent things, or maybe you're doing enchantress things. Cool.
All right. Is this the last one? Nope, there are 2 more. It is Get Lost. It's 1 and a white for an instant to destroy target creature, enchantment, or planeswalker. Its controller creates 2 map tokens. Map tokens are artifacts with 1 tap sacrifice this artifact. Target creature you control explores only as a sorcery. So this is give sort of minimal stuff in exchange for cheap mana cost and versatility. So 2 mana, destroy a creature, enchantment, or planeswalker, and give them 2 maps.
It's like Fateful Absence, which is the destroy a creature or a planeswalker, give them a clue. This adds enchantment and gives them a worse permanent, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd put map tokens at like, they're not worth a card. Are 2 worth a card? Probably close.
Yeah.
It costs them some mana and whatnot, but like they're probably going to draw a land or something off of it.
Yeah, which means that you add just the full enchantment value off of Fateful Absence, and this card has seen play. I know Commander players really prioritize flexibility in the removal. If we have a removal spell, we really want to be able to answer it. But in white, you're fighting with Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile, which are just the best ways to remove creatures and the most efficient. So this gives you a little bit more flexibility in that 2 slot, which I like better than like the 3 mana removal that we've gotten. Like, we've talked about not being a big fan of Generous Gift.
Yeah.
And then the most recent one that gives a human. This one.
Stroke of Midnight. Well done.
I
played a lot of limited.
Yeah. This doesn't give them blockers, and it answers a lot of the problem permanents for only 2 mana.
Yeah, I wonder how big a downside it is that it doesn't hit artifacts. But the fact that it hits creatures and enchantments, planeswalkers won't come up that much, but when it does, it'll be important. Yeah. Soul Partition is a card you put down that I think I like a little bit better than this one. It's the one that makes the spell, it exiles it, but they can cast it again, but it costs 2 more to cast.
Yeah, it's like a super bounce.
Yeah. And I think you and I are both higher than the average player on delay style cards. Most people read stuff that is obviously a delay and don't like it. And I just see removal as a delay anyway.
Yeah.
So
they're going to try and get it back, or they're going to find something else anyway.
But this slots right in there, hits 3 different permanent types, and is only 2 mana, which is a big deal.
It's pretty good, especially in decks that are splashing white, or like white is not the primary color. I think this is a really easy removal spell to lean on. There's 2 more. We've got Permission Denied. White and a blue for an instant. Counter target non-creature spell. Your opponents can't cast non-creature spells this turn. You didn't.
You didn't say the magic word. Hold on to your butts. Okay, that's it.
It's so good. So this card's super fun. This is a negate plus a silence effect, but only for non-creature spells this turn. We talked about this a little bit because I think the first thing I thought of was Adovan's Veto.
Yeah.
Which white and a blue counter non-creature, and then this spell can't be countered.
Yeah. Similar costs, both non-creature spells, and then the question is this spell can't be countered better than your opponents can't cast non-creature spells this turn? And to me, yes, this spell can't be countered is quite a bit better, even though I think when you read it, it seems as if, oh, my opponents can't cast non-creature spells this turn. That seems pretty good. But you have to think of, like, in reality, if you're countering a non-creature spell, what is it probably? If it's on your turn, it's probably a counterspell of theirs, which means that, yes, you would like them to not cast non-creature spells, but the most likely non-creature spell they're likely to cast after that one is another counterspell, and you're in a counter war, in which case this won't resolve in time to stop those other counterspells.
Right.
In the other scenario, you're countering something they're casting on their turn, which is a board wipe or a really big effect. Something that's scary to you that you're feeling the need to counter, in which case they're unlikely to be needing to cast more non-creature spells after that. And if they are, it's probably a counter spell, which they will cast before this resolves, blah, blah, blah. So it's hard to come up with scenarios where your opponents can't cast non-creature spells is actually applicable.
Yeah. Silence is a card that does see some play, but Silence is, of course, proactive, so you can cast it in the upkeep and be like, no non-creature spells this turn. Permission Denied relies on them putting a spell on the stack first and sort of opening up the counter war, which I suppose so does Silence, but...
Silence, I've definitely been silenced in my upkeep and lost games to it. And if this could do that, the additional utility might bump it up. It definitely would make it better. And would it bump it above Dovin's Veto? I don't know. I don't know how you'd template a card that way. But if it had that mode of like counter target non-creature spell and somehow separated from that, but also is, and you can cast it on its own, is
choose mode,
your opponents can't cast non-creature spells this turn. It would be a different thing. But because they're tied together, you have to have a target before you can even try and do this.
Right.
Yeah. You just can't cast it on their upkeep and turn off their turn.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's an interesting spell. I wonder if it's more powerful the more like competitive and stormy your playgroup is. Like if your playgroup is always going off and casting a bunch of stuff in one turn, then maybe this is something that you look at. But you also already have to be in blue and white, and you're probably playing the free counter spells over it
and the
anyway.
storm has to be not instant speed, and
I just think of Enchantress decks where it's like I cast this and I draw 4 cards, and I cast this and I draw 4 cards, and I cast this and I draw 4 cards, and you can like turn that turn off, but that's relevant in one turn, and the rest of the time it's negate, which is fine.
Yeah, I would say negate's probably better most times, just easier to cast.
Yeah, it's easier to cast. Okay, now we have one more.
Yeah, and this one, could I forget it? Because I like this card a lot, actually. Yeah, this is Zoyoa's Justice. No way I pronounced that right. I'm sorry. It is 1 in red for an instant. The owner of target artifact or creature with mana value 1 or greater shuffles it into their library. Then that player discovers X, where X is its mana value. So discovers that Cascade variant we talked about earlier. So you cannot do this on stuff with mana value 0.
No lands, no tokens.
Yeah. But anything else, anything 1 mana value or greater, you shuffle it into the library. It's not even destroyed, right?
Yep.
Like shuffle it in, and then they discover the CMC or the mana value of the thing that got shuffled in. Obvious comparisons to Wild Magic Surge and Chaos Warp.
Yeah, this gets around the problems of those two, which is like I answer a thing that's a problem right now and I get a bigger problem. I hit, something crazy off of the Chaos Warp that you're like, oh no!
The worst this one can do is as big of a problem.
As big of a problem.
Yeah.
Which, we'll deal with that next.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think there's still scenarios where you do make it worse, but those scenarios are somewhat tempered.
Right.
But also, it goes to the thing we were talking about earlier, where the higher number of Discover or Cascade it's not a force multiplier in like a linear way.
Yeah, it raises the ceiling, but it doesn't change the floor.
Yeah, so a 7 mana thing that I use this card on is still likely to get me about whatever the average curve of the deck is, 2.8 mana worth of thing in replacement. And that's great. And it also puts a ceiling. Like if I get rid of a 4 mana thing, they cannot get a 7 mana thing off of it. And that is pretty good.
It's pretty good. And it's 2 mana.
Yeah.
1 in a red for this is awesome. This feels like a little bit of a techier, like an Abrade kind of.
Yeah.
Which is an Abrade that scales with the game, which has always been the issue with Abrade. Abrade is awesome, but it doesn't late in the game.
More toughness, you're like,
nah. And this is an Abrade that's like, okay, I'm coming with you, and you'll get a spell accordingly.
You think about Tybalt's Trickery, which has, similar downside to Chaos Warp. We do not hesitate to play Tybalt's Trickery. It's a great card. Chaos Warp, same thing. You don't hesitate to play it. These are good cards, even though once in a while you do get burned by it, but the overall average of it is in your favor for sure. For a little hot second there, and you talked me out of it, you're right. I was like, man, is this just better than Chaos Warp? But Chaos Warp, hits more permanent types for 1 other mana. So I do believe this doesn't replace Chaos Warp, but I think Chaos Warp is like every red deck pretty much. I run it unless I can get, unless I have like white to sort of cover the removal angle, because red just has a hard time dealing with enchantments, and Chaos Warp will do it. And then, if they got a Planeswalker, I can do that too. But I think, I don't want to say the name, Zoyoa's Justice. I think this red card that we're talking about right now.
Yeah. Zoyoa's
is good enough that it's Tybalt's Trickery-esque. Probably not quite as good as Tybalt's Trickery, but like in that tier, like at the bottom of that tier, there's Tybalt's Trickery, then Chaos Warp, and then this.
Yeah. And Chaos Warp, if you're running Chaos Warp, I encourage you to look twice at all the decks that it's in. I see Chaos Warp in Boros decks all the time, and you're like, no. White can answer it. Yeah. Don't lean on red.
That's the whole thing about white.
Go to white.
They can answer all the permanents.
Don't play the red one.
Yeah.
If you're playing Rakdos.
Yes.
Now we're talking Chaos Warp.
Boom.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Grixis. Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just look at it again. Make sure you're not leaning on something that is not super good, where there are cards that are super good.
Even green, you're like, oh no, enchantments and artifacts, we got that covered.
Yeah, you don't need Chaos Warp. Okay, sweet. I think this card's awesome. I'm really excited about the new suite of removal spells. I love that they're all 2 mana. Are they all 2 mana? Yes. In like 1 in each color. They all just are efficient and do what we need them to do and have that thing that we're always looking for in removal. Exciting stuff.
Okay, so that is going to conclude our In the 99 new card analysis from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Before we go, we're going to talk about what our favorite card in the 99 from this set is. Rachel, you want to go first?
I alluded to it a little bit, but I really like Tishana's Tidebinder. I just like the moments that those cards create where you're like, everybody thinks you're dead, and you're like, hey, we're not.
Yeah.
I have it.
It's very tricky.
And it's a cool one. It's fun in blink spells, and I like Merfolk, so.
Yeah, I like that card a lot too. Mine was Squirming Emergence.
Yeah, the reanimation spell.
Yeah, I feel like I play a lot of Reanimate just as like if it's black, Reanimate's so efficient. I play like Phantasmal Image a lot. It's just so efficient. It's hard to be like, I will find a cool spot. I will do something powerful with this, and just through pure mana efficiency. And I feel like Squirming Emergence kind of fits that bill. This
is a card that really feels good when you play it. Because you have so many choices and you can imagine all the lines, and it's when it's in your hand, you're like, okay, if I can figure this out, I can do it. So it makes you feel smart, and it enables those lines without being the kind of card that's like, whenever you do this, you also do this.
Yeah, and then this triggers that.
And so your brain isn't gummed up with like this and that and this and that.
You're just like, I just got to decide what card I want.
Yeah.
I'm going to play this card and then that card, or I can get this card and then that card. But that's what I'm thinking about is like my sequencing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It makes you feel smart without feeling overwhelmed, which is cool.
All right, so the most powerful card in the 99 is the next category. I think we should let the patrons answer this one first. We put a poll out on our Patreon to see what our patrons thought was the most powerful card in the 99 from the set. And drumroll, please. The winner is, they decided it was Ojer Tak, Deepest Foundation, and it was not close.
No, so we put this poll out on both Discord and Patreon, and it's really funny because the Patreon votes are like 50% Ojer Tak.
We put up like 12 cards or something.
Yeah, out of 10 options, 50% that, and then you go in the Discord and it's like 2 or 3 people voted for it and like one of the other ones won. Yeah. So it's a high variance, but decidedly Ojer Tak won that vote. We've already talked about it, but it's definitely going to do the biggest stuff.
Yeah, most powerful is an interesting way to frame a question because you can interpret it in different ways. One way to interpret it is like, what's the most powerful thing a card could do, and how powerful is that compared to the most powerful card any other card could do? But you can also say, on average, what do I think this card, how is it going to perform? And that's how I'm measuring it.
Or what's going to show up in the most decks.
Yeah, exactly. How broad is the application of this thing? Because it could be narrow and very powerful. Do I have that, say that's more powerful than something that's less powerful but broad? I can use it in a million different situations. You know, I obviously tend toward this sort of million situations myself, but you can't fault anybody for saying, like, for sort of choosing the other path as the reason they chose whatever. So
absolutely.
Having said that, I picked the card I don't like to say out loud because I can't pronounce it, Zoyoa's Justice, as what I thought was the most powerful, simply for the fact that I think it does meaningfully sort of bump out some other options that I think and get into red decks here at a pretty high rate.
Yeah, I really like that this is like, all right, a Braid, which is still pretty good and I think a little underplayed. It kind of gets pushed down for just a removal spell that answers more threats.
Yep.
It can be really frustrating playing red and just knowing that you're like, I have 3 answers for this thing and I have to dig or like...
Yeah. Yeah, just another way to get rid of, anything, any size.
Creature, artifact, plus you combine it
gets
with
around
liquid metal,
indestructible. Red just has trouble with certain things, and this, and for 2 mana, they didn't make it cost 4 or 5, where it's just untenable. Yeah.
Mine, I really struggled with. There's a lot of cards that are really powerful in certain situations. I think in terms of the ones that show up that you're like, ooh, something big cometh. And that's going to show up in a lot of decks in powerful ways is Roaming Throne. We spent a lot of time talking about it. Obviously, this is kind of it's a do nothing doubler, but the fact that it's 4 mana and that it doubles like attack triggers, damage triggers, ETB triggers, and then also counts for a ton of cards in your deck.
On combat damage trigger.
Yeah.
Double Sword of Feast of Famine.
It just, it really does a lot, and a lot more the more you think about it. So I think that's my pick for today. I think it's certainly one that we're going to see a lot of.
Yeah, we're going to see that card a lot. It is very cool. I think the other one we're going to see a lot is the Tendershoot Dryad.
Yes, the Wanderglyph, I think.
Illustrious Wanderglyph.
Well done.
Probably.
It sounded right. It had the rhythm of the card.
That's right.
It was said so. It had the cadence. Yeah. Wait, nope, that's a different one.
She's just
sorry. I'm trying to find the. I'm trying to find what the name is.
To see if I was right or not. I just want to say, what do you think? Oh, Illustrious Wanderglyph. I was right. Never didn't have it.
Despite that name being utter nonsense, you remembered.
That was so lucky. All right, to the listeners, what do you think about Lost Caverns of Ixalan? Are you excited about it as we are? What new cards are going to slot perfectly into your existing commander decks? Or are there any brand new commander decks you're going to build from this set? We'd love to hear from you in the comments on Twitter. You can email us on Discord, send us a Patreon message, put a comment on our TikTok or on Facebook. We even have that. We got everything. It's easy to talk to us. We're not hard to find.
Hopefully not. We're really working hard.
Yeah.
We talked about a lot of Magic cards today. Of course, you can pick up any of those while supporting the show by going to cardkingdom.com/command. Bookmark it, and then every time you shop at Card Kingdom, you'll be supporting the show. Plus, they have a huge selection of Magic cards, so you can get a ton of cards from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. You can get sealed product from Lost Caverns. These precons are awesome. If you have any interest in any of them, go get them from Card Kingdom, and they will ship it to you in one tidy package, and it'll be professionally packaged. That is the biggest thing that I love about Card Kingdom is when I'm shopping for my Magic cards, I want the card that I buy to be the card that shows up on my doorstep. And I know that when I'm shopping at Card Kingdom, they're going to wrap it in a way that it is not going to get damaged in the mail, even if it gets shoved into my mailbox by somebody who doesn't know what it is.
Yeah, we're going into rainy season too.
Absolutely. They put them in plastic and tape them all up and then put them in bubble wrap. Keep your cards safe. Make sure that when you're spending money, you're getting exactly what you want. Shop at cardkingdom.com/command.
Yeah, they're in Seattle. They know about rain.
Yeah.
And then,
they're tested.
Yep. And then once you get those cards and they are not waterlogged because Card Kingdom has packaged them correctly, you still want to keep them safe for the future. And the best way to do that is with ULTRAPRO products. Go to ultrapro.com/command. You can find all kinds of cool sleeves, deck boxes, playmats, wall scrolls. They have the licensing agreement with Wizards of the Coast. So if you want the awesome, cool Lost Caverns of Ixalan artwork on that stuff, they've got it. And they also all the time have tons of huge deals and discounts and savings that go through their website. That happens just on and off all the time. If you sign up for their newsletter, they'll tell you about it, but also just sort of going back to ultrapro.com/command and checking once in a while, you will find stuff, I promise. And we've been mentioning Apex Sleeves, which is sort of their new product that's coming down the line here very, very soon.
So excited.
Yeah, we've had a chance to try out these new sleeves. They've been working on them for years. They've come up with some really incredible testing processes, and they're a game changer. We're really excited about them here at the Command Zone. So if you want to find out more about it, Apex Sleeves, you can find those links in the show notes. Again, ultrapro.com/command.
And we're on TikTok. We're releasing short form material. Go follow us on TikTok. Follow us on Instagram if you haven't already. Go check those out. They're a ton of fun to make, and we hope you're enjoying them.
Yeah, we're considering making some original stuff for TikTok. So, the best way to encourage us to do that is to follow us there. Because if those numbers get high enough, we go, yeah, it might be worth it.
Might be TikToking. Maybe we'll get Josh to dance. Big thank you here.
I'm not above it. Yep.
Our amazing team here at the Command Zone. Thank you to Damon Lentz, Eric Lem, Megan Yip, Gaurav Galati, Jordan Pridgeon, Jamie Block, Arthur Meadowcroft, Manson Lung, Josh Murphy, Jake Boss, Sam Waldo, Evan Limburger, Katie Cole, Mitch Trafford, and yours truly, Jimmy Wong.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching.
See you next time.
Peace.
Thank you for your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter @JFWong and @JoshLeeQuai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.